From the very beginning we see an exciting scene in which a young girl, with fiery hair and looking like an elf, casts a spell. She is the one who commands the water and asks the Lord of Spirits to answer her call. She stands upright, concentrating on the words of the spell. The blue rays of magic flowed into a light-colored ball, illuminating the space around her like a small sun. Her delicate face expressed a mixture of anticipation and excitement. There was visible worry in her eyes. She stood silent and just watched the scene. The rays of magic finally converged at one point, and suddenly a bright flash illuminated the area with its radiance. Thanks to the surge of this energy, we see our heroine in the middle of a dark forest with a clear blue lake. A pillar of water, surrounded by a magical aura, began to rise from the lake as if coming to life. With interest the girl, with her pink, like the coloring of a flamingo bird, eyes, watched what was going on. She could not look away. She watched as the pillar of water began to take on the features of a human face. Suddenly, a man with long blue hair and snow-white skin appeared in front of her, as if he had completed his transformation. His hair, like streams of blue flame, fell over his shoulders. The girl was stunned by his beauty, so much so that she stared at him with her mouth open, not noticing anything else. A man in a long white dress-like garment and skin like moonlight stood before her. He wanted to know who had summoned him. Judy, so our heroine introduced herself to the Spirit Lord, answering that she had summoned him. Suddenly Judy felt dizzy. Exhausted, she fell right into the arms of the Spirit Lord. He certainly wasn't happy about it. From that moment on, Judy's life became like a fairy tale. She made a contract with that Spirit Lord and now they live together as if they were ordinary people. His name is Elaine, by the way. They spent their time together, learning magic and reaching new heights. While Judy rejoiced at her victory over the wild beast, Elaine grumbled like an old man. "You shouldn't rejoice so much," he said. "Or she should try harder next time," although Judy caught this fish in a pretty interesting way. But despite Elaine's nagging, he cared for and protected her. He considered Judy a weak half-elf and for that reason he had to look after her. Elaine became her support and backbone. And here the great Spirit Lord is helping his adorable Judy, make soup. And yet, they were a beautiful couple and perfect for each other. Whether it was a real relationship or just the fulfillment of a contract, there was only one thing you could say when you looked at the two of them: love. Judy lowered her gaze. She wanted to tell Elaine what she had been thinking about for a long time. She asked for her true wish to be granted. Elaine was puzzled. He smiled and asked Judy to simply tell him what she wished for. Judy wanted Elaine to share some of his mana with her. She brought her hands together and asked him like a child asks its parent. Elaine wanted to know how much mana she needed. After all, with his aura she could become an 8th grade mage. Apparently that would be a good achievement for Judy. She only asked for 1/10 of his mana. Elaine raises his hand and a blue orb appears above his palm, enveloped in blue streams of his magic. Judy had asked for the power herself, but she was still worried that something bad would happen if Elaine gave it to her. She was a little confused, her thoughts making Judy doubt her wish. Elaine knew that all would not be well after he gave up some of his power, but it didn't matter to him. He wanted to help Judy, to make her stronger and better, and the rest didn't matter. Judy touched Elaine, a smile on her face. Judy was overjoyed and thanked Elaine profusely. As Elaine transferred his power to her, something strange happened. We see Elaine's mana, with Judy's hands reaching for it on one side and a hand with a red flame forming over it on the other. The space around the girl took on dark purple colors, as if she had entered another dimension. In front of Judy stood a man in a black cloak with a red hood. Over his palm was an energy similar to the one Elaine had given her. Only this mysterious stranger's energy was red like fire and blood. The stranger called that blob of energy the child of Judy's blood and Elaine's mana and, pointing his hand at the girl, placed it in Judy's belly. He warned Judy that she must carry it herself. Suddenly the man began to disappear. He had promised to visit Judy in 10 months. A beam of violet light appeared behind him, a mist enveloped the space around him, and the stranger disappeared. We are transported to Judy and Elaine's house. Their house stood in a small clearing in the middle of the forest and was surrounded by a magical barrier. Something started hitting the barrier. Apparently someone really wanted to get into the house. The attacks worked and the barrier was completely dissipated. The house was left without external defenses. But despite what was happening outside, Judy stood unperturbed, all her attention focused on the unborn child. There was a splash behind Judy's back, but she was still as calm. It was Elaine who had dispelled the barrier around the house. The barrier was a surprise to him, and Elaine wanted to know the reason for Judy's behavior. His face expressed anger and irritation. He didn't understand why Judy wanted to hide from him. Enraged, Elaine voiced his suspicions. Judy had made a contract with a demon? But why had she done it? But Judy still continued to stand with her back to him, as if ignoring him. Maybe she just didn't want to talk to him. This infuriated Elaine, his face reddening with anger. He demanded an explanation from Judy. Suddenly Judy turns and answers in the affirmative. Elaine was right after all, she had indeed made a contract with the demon. Judy with a calm expression, without guilt, regret or anger once again confirmed Elaine's words. Elaine continued to question her angrily. He needed to know why Judy had done such a thing. Why she would do such a thing, since he had already given her his powers. With imperturbable calmness Judy said words that a man would hardly want to hear from a woman. She decided that Elaine didn't need to know about this and had nothing to worry about. Elaine didn't understand how she could do this to him. He remained filled with anger, as if he had been betrayed and his trust trampled. He stopped this pointless dialogue by lowering his gaze. Just a few seconds later, Elaine was gone. He left the house in a depressed state. Judy continued to stand in the same place, still unfazed. She thought she had done the right thing, or there was no other way to explain the calmness on her face. Judy did not blame Elaine for her outburst of emotion, for Elaine did not know the whole truth. She only sighed quietly. Outside the window of their house, the sun was setting and the leaves were falling. Time passed, summer was replaced by fall, and hers by winter. On a frosty winter day, Judy was sitting at a table by the window, holding a piece of paper and a pen. She was warmly dressed, steam coming out of her mouth, because the house was cold. For the first time Judy wrote a letter to her unborn child. It seemed like an ordinary letter, but for her it was something difficult. Judy wanted to hear the word mommy from her child as soon as possible. She was ready to give everything to make that moment come sooner. But Judy was so happy to realize that she had this child. Judy goes on to write words that would make not only a child but an adult empty a tear. She leaves immediately after the baby is born, without explaining why she is doing so, but Judy promises to watch over the baby and Elaine from heaven. Meanwhile, Elaine sat in a place far from his beloved, being sad and depressed. A girl in a white dress and red hair, unfamiliar to us, was watching him. She thought Elaine was pathetic and should go to Judy if he wanted to see her, but Elaine was stubborn. The girl understood that he was the way he was, but she sincerely hoped that Elaine would not regret his decision. Judy continued to write her letter. She asked her child not to resent her father, no matter what emotions Elaine showed toward him. Judy was sure that the father would love his child sincerely. She didn't know if she would be able to see her baby, but his movements in her belly made Judy really happy. She finished her letter and put it in the envelope. Putting the letter on the table, Judy hoped her daughter would be happy even if her mother wasn't around. Judy loved her very much, even though she had never seen her. She barely had time to put the letter on the table before the very same demon appeared behind her back. Above his back, his dark aura that looked like black flames manifested. With a sly smile, he said it was payback time. Judy admitted that she really wished she could stay with her family, she was sorry to leave them behind. But her face remained calm, she was not afraid of her fate, but had accepted it during her very first encounter with the demon. The last time Judy confessed her love for Elaine, leaving him with a child. Suddenly Elaine appears, he wanted to save his beloved, but it was too late. Judy was unconscious in the demon's arms. Elaine tried to use his magic. He wanted with all his heart to save Judy. A burst of Elaine's water magic erupts. But the demon manages to escape, taking Judy with him and pointing out Elaine's tardiness with a sense of superiority. Elaine stands motionless, a look of incomprehension on his face. Water dripped at his feet. It was the remnants of the magic he'd used to try to stop the demon. Elaine wondered what had just happened. His face shifted with emotion. Though he was a spirit, he still treasured the man closest to him. He raises his hands. A tremor could be seen in Elaine's hands, it was as if he was about to cry. Clutching his face, he shouted his beloved's name loudly. Emotions overwhelmed him, he couldn't hold back any longer. He was standing near where Judy had just been, the very letter lay on the table, and a strange sound was heard from outside. It was a baby crying. His daughter was crying as she lay in the chair. This little girl looked a lot like her father. Her hair, eyebrows, and eyelids were as blue as her father's. Elaine noticed his daughter. He saw her for the first time in his life, but was he happy about it? The father lowered his arms, clearly intending to do something. He probably wants to pick up his little girl and hug her. And then there's a wave. The water begins to envelop the chair where the infant wished to be. What? Elaine decides to blame her daughter for what happened. She's just a baby after all, how could it be? The water continues to envelop the crying child. I hope Elaine realizes the consequences of such actions. After all, he's already been burned once. The child disappears from the chair he was in. In an instant we are transported from a cozy cabin in the woods, to a beach with crystal clear and bright blue water. The waves were crashing against the shore. Elaine and Judy's young daughter finds herself on this lovely beach. She was brought here by her father and left alone. Strangely, she was no longer crying, but shivering asleep on the sand. The sea waves rolled a little on her fragile little body. She was cold and scared alone without her mother and father, no one took her in his arms, hugged her, warmed her and rocked her. That was her birthday and the first minutes of her life in this world. This is a picture of two beautiful black-haired babies. One sucking on a pacifier, the other drinking milk. It doesn't look ordinary, but is this the world we've just been in? Another photo, it shows older kids, but it looks like the same little ones. And here they are with their parents. It looks like a happy and ordinary family. How cute, they're building a snowman. You can see that the father is pleased, but not wholeheartedly, heh. On the beach? It reminds me of the same beach where they left a tiny little girl. Oh, that must be one of those kids in the photo. Looks like she decided to reminisce about her childhood and was looking through the family album. As it turned out, she was the abandoned girl. Elaine made another mistake and lost absolutely everything he had. Those people in the photo saved the little girl and raised her as their daughter. The girl was very grateful to them, and she grew up together with her brother Haman. She heard someone come to the door. "Is she ready?" asked the person standing outside the door. And the girl answered that she was on her way out, closing the photo album. The door began to open. Her brother Haman, a handsome dark-haired boy, entered the room. Smiling, he asked why his sister was taking her time. Oh, she was furious that her brother had entered without knocking. "Are you sick of living?" the girl shouted. Haman barely had time to get out of her room. Their mother was standing outside the room, turning to the daughter. "We learn her name. The girl's name is Hayin. Mom asked if her daughter had packed. Heian explained to her mom why she was late, and they smiled together and went to Heian. As Heian leaves the room, we can examine the family photo on the wall. It looks like the children grew up in a police officer's family, and judging by the medal on his chest, he was good at his job. While Heian went to the pool with her family, let's find out what her real father Elaim is up to. Looks like he decided to visit their old house in the middle of the woods and did so for the first time in 17 years. As he approached the table, his attention was drawn to the very letter Judy had written for Heian. A letter? Elaim asked in surprise. It was the first time he had seen it. Elaim took the letter out of the envelope and began to read. He read very carefully, absorbing every word. Elaim was somehow very surprised and confused to learn that Judy had left the child to him. A very strange reaction on his part. Suddenly Elaim raised his palm and began to conjure. His gaze was very determined, but his expression was grim, as if he had never smiled once in all those 17 years. His water magic was turning into a whirlpool. Thankful for this ability, he could watch his daughter, and it seemed to be the first time he had seen her since he had left her on the beach. He didn't say a word, just stood there silently staring at the only thing that reminded him of Judy in any way. Despite her beautiful smile and cheerful mood, Elaim referred to his daughter only as his aura. Interrupted from his observation, Elaim began to increase the size of the vortex. The funnel was getting bigger and bigger. After 17 years, he decided to fulfill his lover's last wish. Heian was puzzled, she didn't understand what was happening. The girl was swimming calmly when suddenly something strange began to happen. She saw before her the vortex her father had created. Of course, she didn't know that yet and couldn't know it. Heian thought someone had pulled a cork from the bottom of the pool, but the other visitors didn't notice anything and went on about their business. A strong stream of water began to pull the girl into this vortex. She didn't have time to realize or understand anything. The whirlpool grew larger and larger as it continued to engulf Heian. She was startled, completely unaware of what was happening. Heian called out for help to her brother and mom, but no one heard her. They were very close to her. The girl was submerged under the water, not understanding why no one could hear her. Her body was almost completely swallowed by the water. Heian breathed in as much air as she could, her body completely underwater. She couldn't breathe, her strength was running out, the air had stopped flowing into her lungs. Heian's hair was colored bright blue, as it had been on the first day of her life. And her breasts became, smaller several times over. Heian went deeper and deeper under the water. It seemed that it was not a pool but an ocean with no bottom. And at that moment, the girl lost consciousness. No longer could she fight or hope to escape. Suddenly Heian finds herself on the bed, still unconscious, as if in a water cocoon. The water evaporated and the girl could breathe again, but she didn't come to her senses. Her biological father stood over her. Heian's appearance changed, every hair on her head became blue in color, her face seemed to have lost weight. She was completely different from her former self. Elaim still stood beside her without averting his gaze. But there was no positive emotion on his face, no paternal love for his child. As it turned out, the father of the year Elaim didn't even know the sex of his child, thinking it was a boy. Elaim didn't really want to wait for Heian to wake up. In a cold and stern voice, he said that the child should consider it an honor to be cared for by the elemental king himself. Elaim left again. After a little while, Heian woke up. Her body was in pain. Of course, such a transformation would hardly make her feel comfortable, so to speak. Heian heard voices around her, those were saying that she was finally awake. The girl didn't understand what was happening, she looked around. They were two small creatures with wings, looking like fairies. They did not emit an ounce of hostility at all. Heian was a little scared, it was the first time she had seen these creatures and mistook them for ghosts. Heian hid under the blanket. They were called elemental spirits. The blue spirit's name was Undine, and she was the spirit of water. The green one, the wind spirit, introduced herself as Sylph. Heian didn't say anything back to them, she was still scared. Heian thought she was seeing ghosts because she had almost drowned. Pondering, she continued to consider these spirits. Distracted from her thoughts, Heian looked around. Where am I? I didn't realize where I was. Looking around, all she saw was a place unfamiliar to her with creatures not of her world. She was looking for her mom. Fear slightly gone, Heian directed her gaze to the spirits flying around the room. The spirits flew from side to side, paying no attention to Heian. It was creepy for Heian to talk to ghosts, but she had no other choice. She began to ask the spirits if they had seen anyone else in the area. But the spirits saw no one but her. She was the only person in the place. The last thing Heian remembered was being sucked into a whirlpool while swimming. She wondered who had brought her to this place. It still seemed to her that she had died. But Heian refused to believe it. She got up from the bed, wobbling from side to side. It was hard to stand on her feet. Heian had to look around and see what this strange place was. The weakness in her body was too much. Her legs didn't want to obey. Heian went to the door at the end of the room and opened it. In front of her she saw a dark room with a couch, a table, a chair, and a rug on the floor. Continuing to look around the place, Heian saw the kitchen, then the front door. Everything looked like an ordinary house. All the windows in the house were boarded up. Was it an abandoned house or was someone deliberately keeping her in? It all seemed strange to the girl. Her hand reached for the front door handle. Heian was about to leave the house. Heian's face was very agitated, sweat beading on her delicate skin. The door opened, the light blinding her eyes. What was Heian sure of? She opened her eyes, they seemed to be getting used to the light after the pitch black and eerie darkness. Suddenly, excitement was replaced by surprise. What did she see in front of her? Heian saw the seabed. This house stood on the seabed, with sea creatures swimming around it, and trees without leaves standing on the property. Different emotions could be seen on Heian's face. Shock, surprise, incomprehension. Her brain didn't realize what was happening. Heian turned pale, it looked like she was about to faint once more. Bam! There was the sound of impact from the fall. Heian was lying on the floor. A man in a long white robe approached her. As expected, it was her daddy Elaine. He lifted Heian with his magic power, which enveloped the girl's entire body. Elaine continued to think it was a boy. He thought the child was too weak as the possessor of his aura. He gently places Heian's unconscious body on the bed. Elaine stood beside the bed, wondering why his child was so weak. Was it because he was in a world where the elements were weak? Heian began to come to her senses. Slowly, she woke up, her head throbbing. Heian realized that she had lost consciousness again. Again she found herself in that strange room. Heian still didn't understand what was happening. There was no longer any fear left on her face. She didn't seem to care anymore. She heard Elaine's voice calling her, dumbass. Heian flinched in surprise. When Heian turned around and saw the man in the room, her soul was filled with joy. Elaine stood in the corner, his face expressing displeasure and contempt. Heian looked at him the same way Judy had looked at him the first time they met. She didn't know who this man was yet, but all of Heian's attention was on Elaine. She was dazzled by the beauty of this tall, blue-haired young man. Elaine grudgingly asked what the guy was staring at. He still didn't understand anything. Heian smiled and apologized for being so rude, but in her mind she already knew how disgusted he was with her. She had to understand what had happened, and this blue-haired brute was the only one who could explain it. With a haughty look Elaine tried to hurt Heian just a little. She had no choice but to bear it. Through her frustration, she asked where they were. Elaine stood idly by, his face unchanged, being displeased. He looked like he was going to answer her questions. The map we see gives us some insight into the world Heian is on. It certainly wasn't Earth. The map shows a continent surrounded by water and littered with many cities. The place where our heroes were was called the Karjalan Sea. It was the first time Heian had heard of it. She tried to figure out where on earth this sea was. She was more concerned with why they were at the bottom of this sea and about that she asked her interlocutor. The answer startled Heian. This man had brought her here. Heian was shocked. Was he really able to bring this house to the bottom of the sea with her? Elaine looked at her calmly. He explained that not only had he brought her, but he had put a barrier around the house, for safety. Heian started asking even more questions. She wanted to know who this strange man was and what was going on. Elaine listened to her in silence. He called himself the king of the water elemental without saying a word about their kinship. Heian was seized with even more shock and surprise. The king of water? How could that even be? She thought Elaine was just like those little spirits that looked like fairies. To her, he was a kind of ghost. There was no room in Heian's understanding for such beings. This was the first time she had encountered them. She could be understood. Elaine smiled proudly and smugly, indicating that Heian hadn't even dreamed of meeting such an important person. But that wasn't what the girl was thinking about. Heian began to cry and gasp, her mind unable to think straight. Elaine began to get annoyed with Heian's behavior. He asked why she started crying. Heian started sobbing so hard that she even embarrassed Elaine. No wonder she's crying. After all, Heian had decided that she had died. It was because of her death that she herself became a ghost and saw all these creatures. Her hysterics were interrupted by a sudden knock. Heian looked up. She saw Elaine's facial expression change dramatically. He emitted a dark aura, and water appeared in the palm of his hand. Something strange was happening. Heian couldn't move. Elaine pointed his palm at her with the spell ready. He decided to warn her, but about what? A sudden blow to the living threw Heian backwards. The poor girl fell to her knees, clutching the area of impact and began coughing violently. She couldn't breathe, tears rolling from her eyes. Elaine's palm was still emitting magic. His water magic was more like tongues of blue flame than water. Elaine was furious at the comparison. Heian had hurt his ego by comparing him to a ghost, and he had promised to kill her if she ever mistook him for a ghost again. Although Heian herself knew nothing about elemental spirits. Yeah, Daddy was pretty pissed off, but he quickly calmed down. Heian sat down on the bed. She could hardly breathe. Trembling she asked, "What do the elements mean?" Elaine was surprised for some reason. He wondered if Heian didn't know about elemental spirits. She couldn't know about them, for the world Heian lived in was different from this one. And Elaine finally remembered it. He said that in his world, everyone knows about elemental spirits. Moreover, some people can make contracts with them and use the spirits' abilities. Elaine used his magic again, but only to show her the memories. The girl was originally born into this world. Elaine seems to want to tell her the truth. He showed her how he had sent her to another world when Heian was still very young. He was silent for a moment. Finished showing her the memories, Elaine squeezed her hand, saying that he was the one who brought Heian back to her homeworld. Emotions overwhelmed Heian. "Was I born in this world?" she asked the spirit. Her face reddened with anger. She took Elaine's story for a lie, for she knew her mother had abandoned Heian on the beach right after she was born. These words infuriated Elaine and he demanded that she stop insulting her mom. Heian was frightened by such yelling. Heian seemed to start believing Elaine's words, she thought. There were more and more questions in her mind. She asked if Elaine knew her mom. Elaine covered his face with his hand as if about to cry. Turning his face away, he only quietly said that Haeun's mom had died. Haeun leaned in. She didn't expect to hear something like that. She wanted to know why her mother had abandoned her. She didn't know the most important thing yet, and Elaine began to tell her. A strange smile appeared on his face, as if he wanted Haeun to know everything as soon as possible. Her mother had never left her or even seen her daughter's face. She would have given anything for such a child, but she died before she could see her. These were the words Elaine said to his daughter. The emotion on Haeun's face cannot be described in words. Elaine couldn't accept the fact that the girl was living because of her mother's sacrifice, so he sent her away from him. It wasn't the mother who abandoned Haeun, it was him. He admitted guilt and said that Haeun had only him to blame. Haeun was filled with anger. Who gave him that right? She shouted it in Elaine's face. Abruptly Elaine grabbed Haeun by the shirt and pulled her closer to him. Elaine told her straight to her face that he never wanted her around him. He only wanted Judy. Elaine let go of Haeun and she fell to the floor. He was about to tell her. Haeun sits on the floor with her mouth open and listens silently. Elaine admits that he is her birth father. The girl sat in shock with her eyes wide open with surprise. She doesn't seem to believe her old man. As expected, she didn't believe it and demanded proof. Elaine tells her to follow him. He's going to show her his own reflection. They both leave the room. It was still very dark inside the house. Haeun could not see anything. Elaine, with a disgruntled face, lit a bright yellow light. That light flew across the room. Haeun stared at it like a child seeing something new for the first time. Haeun went to the mirror. She didn't notice anything and said that she looked as usual. She couldn't figure out what evidence Elaine had until she looked closer. It finally came to her. She cried out in surprise, unable to realize what was wrong with her hair. Haeun plucked out a wisp of hair and scrutinized it with interest and bewilderment. Elaine interrupts his daughter from this important activity and asks her to sit across from him. Haeun sat down in the chair and Elaine told her that she possessed the same aura as him. Though she couldn't realize it yet. Thanks to his aura, Haeun could interact with spirits unlike the rest of the inhabitants of this world. Normally, no one could possess Elaine's aura unless they had a contract with him. Let's take a look at these spirits. Elaine is a water spirit. The one on the right appears to be an earth spirit. On the left is the spirit of wind, and on top is the spirit of fire. The four elementals of this world. Elaine tells us that elementals cannot have offspring. But what does that mean? Haeun stood up abruptly, slapping her hands on the table, interrupting Elaine's story. She decided that if elementals couldn't have offspring, then Elaine couldn't be her father either. Elaine continued to speak. He explained that elementals don't have children because they have no reproductive system. They simply begin to exist, and when they die, they disappear. Elaine said that this was her home now and she should stay in the new world. Haeun was very angry at those words. She jumped up again and slapped her hands on the table. She was worried that her parents from the previous world were worried about her and wanted to go back. And then Elaine decided to calm her down in a very original way. He said that Haeun was simply forgotten in her world. Haeun belongs to this world. Judging from the scenery, this world was about 200 years behind Earth, but it was full of wonders not found on Earth. Haeun was numb. She dropped her hands and stood with her mouth wide open. Elaine went on to say that she was already forgotten, and any record or reminder of her was gone. Angry, Haeun kept saying that it was a lie. She didn't want to believe her captor's words. Elaine was definitely not in agreement with what she said. He thought he had gotten his son back and was not the kidnapper. Haeun became very agitated, shifting her attention from the kidnapping to Elaine calling her son. "I'm a woman," she screamed. But putting her hand on her chest, she noticed something. Something was wrong. She ran her hands over her breasts and realized she was gone. Awkward situation. She had a very bad feeling. Heian told Elaine to wait, and went off to another room herself, closing the door loudly behind him. Elaine didn't understand the reason for this behavior, but seemed to experience embarrassment. Heian stood outside the door and wanted to find out something. It was like she didn't want to do it, mentally preparing for the worst. Heian pulled back her pants and looked over there. But soon she exhaled a sigh of relief. There was nothing dangling. Heian was so happy that she thanked God that she was still a woman. Without a single knock, Elaine entered the room. She told him to wait outside, but he disobeyed. Heian told him that she was not a man. Heian confirmed Elaine's hunch. He thought that since she was descended from a half-elf, she would have a gender. Heian was a unique creature that would not appear again, and Elaine didn't know what to expect from his daughter. Although Heian herself only cared about her gender. Elaine seemed to have pranked Heian. Since she wasn't currently a woman, he could call her a man. The girl was furious at those words. Again Heian began to scream, claiming that she was not a man or his son. Elaine interrupted her, ordering her to be silent. If he chose to call her son, then so be it. Heian didn't accept it. In her mind she called her father a damned old man. Heian was seething with anger. She decides to run away, no matter what it takes. Some time passed. Heian was sleeping sweetly in that very room. Elaine decided to wake her up, but Heian wanted to sleep for another 5 minutes. Suddenly she was underwater, a couple dozen meters from the house she had just been in. Heian tries to inhale, but realizes he is underwater. Had the old man lost his mind? These thoughts were running around in her head. First he called Heian his son, and now he's trying to kill him. It was getting harder and harder to breathe. Her lungs were pierced with pain. She can't breathe, there was only one option left. She needs to get back to the house, it was the only way she could save herself. The distance to the house was too far, she can't make it. Mentally, Heian started to ask for help, losing consciousness in the process. Is this the end? But at the last moment, Elaine shows up. He covers Heian's mouth with his palm, as if giving her a chance to breathe. Did you really want to kill yourself? Heian's father asked, clearly joking with her. As you can imagine, no words of gratitude were heard from Elaine. With this prank, Elaine wanted to awaken his daughter's latent abilities. They seem to be awakened only in certain stressful situations. Heian's displeasure was unimaginable. Since she was kidnapped, let her live her life in peace. That's what she thought. Elaine couldn't believe that his daughter didn't know how to use her energy. Meanwhile, Heian was reminiscing about her family. She missed them a lot. Something is starting to happen. Is her father casting his spells again? Heian's body was enveloped by a blue aura, she was surprised. Elaine removed his hand, but Heian could breathe without any trouble. She had managed to awaken some of her power. This was followed by praise from her father. Heian was not happy because her father called her an idiot. How could that old fart name his daughter like that? Heian thought to herself. Elaine asked who she called old, you know. Only how did he understand it if Heian only thought so? Can he read minds? Heian is again shocked at what's happening. Spirits don't have vocal cords, they used will to communicate. Heian demanded that she stop getting in her head, for she had insulted her father in this way more than once. Elaine, in turn, suggested that she not put her will into her thoughts. Another awkward situation. Heian was already in agreement with everything her father said, just to get back to the house faster. But no such luck, Elaine told her to find her own way. Well, how is she supposed to take it? Elaine advised using the power of the spirits and simply dissolved in the water, wishing them good luck. Following, Heian managed to give her father her opinion of him. It seems like some time had already passed. Heian sat at the bottom of the sea and sighed heavily. It was too much for her, all this training was really wearing her out. Elaine appeared out of nowhere. Like a true teacher, he was giving her instructions. She didn't have to breathe like a human, her body was already taking mana from the water. Heian was tired of her father throwing her into the sea every day and showing up whenever he pleased. Not very politely, but Elaine explained to his daughter why this was the case. She still didn't know how to use her energy. Heian was not very pleased with his admonition. She was already shaking at Elaine's words. Of course, Heian had to go home on her own again. Someone suddenly interferes in their conversation, stating that he will stay with Heian. Judging by his paw, it wasn't a human. It was a huge spirit in the shape of a dog, with a large crystal in the middle of his forehead. His name was Indaren, and Heian was very happy to see him. She rushed to hug the doggy, asking where he had been for so long. Indaren was a very nice, first-class spirit who helped Heian. Also, he could disobey her old man. Thanks to Indaren, Heian didn't need her father as much. And Elaine didn't like it very much. He became uncomfortable in their company, so he just disappeared. Well, this is nothing new in Elaine's behavior. Indaren looked at Heian and asked if he would like to go home at once. He also addressed Heian in the masculine gender, but she didn't mind. Heian thought for a bit and decided to take a walk before they came back. Together they went for a walk on the vast expanse of the Karjalan Sea. Sitting on the back of her faithful assistant, Heian noticed something. It was a shipwreck. Together they came closer and closer to it. This wooden sailing ship was simply enormous. It made the Heian and Indaren seem tiny. Heian decided that there would definitely be treasure inside the ship. Indaren realized what they had come here for. What's with the stereotypes about shipwrecks? She really wanted to check what was aboard the ship. A smirk appeared on her face. She had an escape plan in her head that she had thought of a long time ago, but she needed money to do it. The true reason they had visited this place. Hearing the command, Indaren obediently moved forward. He had been here once before and knew where the breach was. Indaren had investigated this place, since it was not far from here, and it was his territory. That's how he explained it to Heian. Stepping inside, Heian was impressed. She thought it was a cargo ship, but it turned out to be a luxury cruise ship. Heian felt her luck. At this moment she became like a naive child. She imagined herself on top of a mountain of gold, for such an expensive ship certainly had it. Enthusiastically, raising their hands above their heads, they moved off in search of riches. Heian looked around one room, there was nothing but scattered expensive furniture. Then another room. And it was empty. They continued down the long corridor. It was clear from the arrangement of the lights that there was a ceiling beneath their feet. The next room turned out to be like all the previous ones, no hint of riches. Heian closes the door. She was a little disappointed, there was nothing of value on the ship. At least there were no bodies. Heian decided to look on the other deck. Exploring the ship, she saw a ladder somewhere. Ah, there she is. On the upper deck, she saw a more luxurious interior and a bunch of miscellaneous junk. Perhaps the previous rooms were economy class. That's what she suggested to Indaren. Heian walked closer to the furniture and decided to check it out. She rummaged through this pile of once lavish and expensive furniture, so far to no avail. Suddenly she noticed something. It was a thin gold bracelet. Her first valuable find on this ship. Heian found expensive clothes with jewelry that she just took off. She delighted in the findings like a small child delighted in a new toy. Indaren noticed such childlike joy. Satisfied, Heian looks into the closet. She couldn't wait to see what was inside. But what did she see there? It was like a garment. Heian continued to consider. Suddenly, she was overcome with shock. In front of Heian's face was something that looked like a human body. The girl was really scared. Isn't that surprising? A body aboard a shipwreck. Is it really a corpse? Heian cried out. She was trembling all over. The horror of what she saw was evident in her eyes. Indaren turned to speak to his mistress, but Heian did not answer. Suddenly those little spirits appeared. They didn't understand what had happened either. I mean, she must have liked it. But what did they talk about? These little pranksters were using this unfortunate body for some sort of amusement. One of the spirits waved the drowned man's hand at Heian, trying to say hello. Heian started to faint from fear and shock. But a bright blue aura began to appear around her. Clutching her head, she just wanted this body to disappear. The aura or energy around her began to form a vortex. This whirlpool headed towards the body, hitting it. Heian opened her ears and saw. There was a huge hole in the hull of the ship, the size of a man. The place where the body had been was empty. Heian tried to understand what had happened. Was she able to awaken her spiritual power? Until that moment, she couldn't even control a mug of water. And then it hit her. Now she understood what it meant to use the power of her body. It's like making my legs walk. Heian has gotten better again. She rejoiced like a little child. She was smiling ear to ear. Heian could use her power, she continued to cheer. Indaren sat next to her and smiled sweetly as he looked at her. Suddenly Indaren looked to his left, something began to appear near him. It was Elaine, it looked like he was watching them. Indaren was surprised by his host's presence. Elaine looked at his daughter. She's making a fuss over such a trifle, he said. Though he smiled faintly himself. Heian had gotten better, Indaren told him. It was obvious to Elaine. After all, we were talking about the child of the elemental king himself. Elaine seemed pleased with her progress anyway. Elaine walked over to Heian and started talking to her about the power. Did she understand how to use it? The girl turned around in surprise. Yes, replied Heian, while in her thoughts she wondered how he ended up here. She was grateful to that little Undine spirit. Without her help she wouldn't have figured out how to unlock her abilities. Heian smiled sweetly as she continued to think about what had happened. Elaine decided to remind himself. What are you grinning about? Elaine asked. Heian turned around. It seemed to her that Elaine would yell at her for being scared of that body. Heian interrupted the flow of her thoughts, for her father had no trouble reading them. Elaine notices that Heian's mood has changed. Why are you so glum? Speak up if you have something to say. Elaine said. It seemed to Heian that her father would no longer get in her head. Didn't you hear what I was saying? She asked Elaine. In her thoughts, she called her father a crazy old fart while wondering if Elaine could hear her words in her head. Elaine realized that Heian had learned how to use telepathic communication. He called her so impressionable. Heian wanted Daddy to be happy for her for once. She even yelled at him a little. After the walk, Heian came home. She was sitting on a stool outside the house holding a frying pan. The creature beside her resembled a fire spirit, it looked like a chicken. Just as Heian decided to tell us about it. This little girl's name is Casa, a low-ranking spirit who helped with the cooking. Heian just had to put a pan of fish on it and voila, done. But Heian yawned, she was bored. Her life had become a routine. All she did was eat, sleep and train. Boring as hell. She has no one to talk to but the spirits. Her only entertainment is treasure hunting. She pulled out the bag of jewelry she'd managed to find. Heian was looking at one of the gold coins, and it made her think about the lives of people in this world. She tried to recognize the letters that were engraved on the coin. Heian wondered what she would look like in one of the local dresses. What kind of fish is eaten in this world, raw or fried? Do they cook with magic? Do they have cars or carriages? Are their streets planted with trees and flowers? Or maybe they can teleport using magical portals. Heian pondered this with interest. Would she be able to escape during practice, since no one was following her? That's what she thought. However, it was too early to escape, she didn't even understand the language. She didn't like working out, but it was better than going to college. Heian looked at her bag of valuables again. Could she sell the jewelry she had? Or just leave them at home? Her thoughts were suddenly dispelled. She saw smoke. Heian started screaming. Nothing serious happened, just her lunch burned. She only asked why Casa hadn't warned her. Well, Heian will have to cook the clams again. She definitely won't mess them up this time. Elaine came out of nowhere again. You eat the same thing, you have no culinary skills? Elaine said. Heian made excuses that she never cooked for herself and that she had a lot of other things to do. Elaine handed Heian her mother's cookbook. Heian opened it and began leafing through it. She didn't understand the language in which the book was written. How was she supposed to read it? Elaine only sighed heavily, he would have to teach her that too. Heian herself didn't understand why she could speak to any spirits, but she couldn't read a word. It turns out that the spirits could understand each other without a problem. Elaine decided that Judy had anticipated such an option. He handed Heian a paper scroll. What is it? Heian asked with interest. What do you think? It's a scroll. Elaine answered her. She unfolded it, seeing the strange runes inside the circle. This scroll contained a spell that would make Heian a polyglot. She was very surprised, but Elaine said to break it up soon. Heian tears the scroll and streams of magic begin to envelop the girl. A magic seal was glowing above her. Heian watched with interest. In the blink of an eye, all the magic was gone. Did it really work? Now she had to understand what was written in the book. Indeed, as she opened the book, she understood every word in it. I think it worked, said Elaine. He continued to tell Heian something, but she didn't listen to him. She only admired the appetizing pictures in the book. Heian decided to make fried fish for dinner. Elaine and Heian were in the room. She sat at the table while Elaine was about to demonstrate something. He begins to create a spell. The clot of water took on the shape of a bird that flew across the room. Heian only stared in surprise, with her mouth wide open, she marveled at such a trick. And now it was her turn. She didn't mind giving it a try. Heian brought her hands closer together and a watery clot formed between them. She tried to shape it, but it didn't turn out so well. Trying to ask her father a question, he told her to stay focused so as not to mess up the shape of the clot. It has to become more refined for it to work. That's what Elaine said. Heian tries to betray the shape of his magic again. Is that a slime? Father asks. Isn't that a butterfly? Angrily replies Heian. It doesn't look like a butterfly. Elaine continued to grumble, but his daughter just ignored him. We are transported to Heian's room. She was lying in bed disgruntled. She was a little upset. She hadn't asked for any of this. Her father had made her do it, and now he resented her for not being able to do it. She had learned how to create images from clots of water, but irritation was creeping through her. Heian wanted to get out of the sea. She could even read now. There was no stopping her. But there was one problem: how was she going to pull it off? She could try to swim to shore. Though Elaine would catch her faster than she could make it. Then he certainly wouldn't be happy about it. An idea popped into her head. She jumped for joy. Why hadn't she guessed before? Heian could pretend to be drowning and send a distress signal, and then, someone handsome on a beautiful sailboat would rescue her. It was the perfect plan. At least, she thought it was. The next day she went to practice alone. But Darren caught up with her. Without giving any sign, she turned around. "I already thought I'd be on my own today," she said. Darren was a little surprised. She couldn't rely on other spirits all the time. That was how Heian justified her actions. It worked. Darren asked her to return before sunset and swam back. Heian promised to fulfill his request. She waited for her mentor to leave. And was glad she'd managed to divert attention away from herself and be alone. Heian only had to find the ship. And she will be free. Heian surfaced out of the water, for the first time in a while. She saw the vast blue sea, but already on its surface. Heian decided to wait at this spot until she saw some ship. She just sat on the water and waited. She reminded her of a character from her past world. Time passed, she waited. And waited until evening came. All day, no one had ever swam past her. The sun was already setting and Heian was getting ready to go home. Suddenly a ship appeared on the horizon. She quickly plunged into the water, full of joy. Heian started screaming, wanting to be noticed. She called out for help, waving one hand out of the water. The team members seemed to notice her. Heian swam towards the ship, full of joy that she had finally managed to get away from her daddy. 2 men helped her up onto the deck. The girl began to thank them. If it wasn't for them, she would have died. One of the men said he had just done what he had to do. The man started to wonder where she was from. He wanted to help the girl find a home. Heian said her town was small and it was unlikely they'd heard of it, she just wanted to be left at the nearest port. The man began to chuckle strangely, calling her a good catch. Heian didn't realize what was happening. 2 people approached her from behind. They grabbed her arms, preventing her from moving. The girl was terrified of what was happening. What's going on? She shouldn't have trusted people like that. The mustachioed man pointed out politely. He ordered all her things to be taken away. Heian was furious. After examining her, the men realized that the girl was loaded with money. But the bag of gold was not enough for them and one of them wanted to take the ring off her finger. Heian cried out in pain as he tried to remove the ring, but he failed. Their ringleader ordered her not to spoil the valuable merchandise, leave her that ring and lead her away. Heian tried to break free, demanding to let her go. She even thought of knocking them out. But something stopped her. Heian needed a ship to take her to shore. Plus Dad could find her if he uses his power. Heian was thrown into the hold and told to sit quietly. She obeyed her captors. Okay, I'll keep my head down for now. Heian thought. There were inferior spirits flying around inside the room, they seemed to be everywhere. That place was lit up and one could see other people around Heian. They were prisoners like her, no one even looked in her direction. She wondered where this ship was going. Her only problem, though, was that she had no money. But Heian was glad for the ring left on her finger. The bandits couldn't take it down and for good reason. A little backstory, Elaine had given Heian a ring shortly before the incident. Judy had left it to her. And also an envelope with a letter. Elaine gave it to his daughter. After reading part of the letter, Heian realized that her mother loved her a lot. Judy told her in the letter that she was passing on a magic ring that once belonged to Heian's grandmother. She was an elf. Heian decided to measure the ring by putting it on her finger. It was a little big. But suddenly, a bright blue aura began to emanate from the ring. The ring took on the size of Hayen's finger and stopped coming off. Elaine explained to her that the ring holds 3 circles of mana and 1 spell. Once on, the ring wouldn't come off until it broke or the wearer died. Hayen didn't understand anything, but it sounded cool to her. She decided to finish reading the letter she had already forgotten about. Mom wrote that this ring will help Hayen prove who she is when she meets her grandmother. Hayen learns from the letter that her mother's name was Judith Osborne and her grandmother's name was Farash. Grandma didn't have a last name since she was an elf. Her mom asked her to tell her grandmother that she had lived a happy life. Reading this moment, tears began to drip down the letter. They flowed off Hayen's face, she didn't even notice it right away. Hayen didn't understand why she was crying, for she had always hated her biological parents. Remembering that letter and her mother's words, Hayen fell asleep. A sharp sound woke her up. The kidnappers brought dinner to the captives. Thanks to her memories, she even briefly forgot where she was. The bandits were handing out food to people. Hayen was given a tray on which stood a plate of not-so-appetizing chowder, and a loaf of bread. Watery soup and a small piece of bread. She called it a pitiful sight. One of her captors told her not to be picky if she didn't want to starve to death. Poking his finger into her forehead, he warned Hayen not to think or talk about running away. The girl didn't much like this manner of speaking. How will she eat without a spoon? Hayen thought, looking around at the other prisoners. She also got the smallest piece of bread. She squeezed it in her hand and threw it at the back of the head of one of the kidnappers. She couldn't take it anymore, she was sick of it. This guy turned around, full of rage. He and the other 2 decided to teach Hayen a lesson by kneading their fists. Hayen raised her hand and pointed at them, she decides to use her power. These guys pissed her off. Hayen radiated an aura around her. A swift kick. In an instant, all 3 of them were sprawled on the floor. The bald one, unlike his buddies, was still conscious, a look of horror on his face. Hayen moves her fingers as if she wants to call him to her. A huge clot of water in the shape of an arm grabs the remaining bandit. Being in a desperate situation, the guy begs to be spared. Strike again. The ship snapped in half like a brittle twig. Hayen rescued the captives by placing them in water cocoons. 2 Indaren-like spirits appeared around her. There was no stopping her. You should have thought before you treated her like that. The remaining crew members were swimming in the sea, they were asking for help. But everything that happened turned out to be just Hayen's fantasy. If she set it all up, the old man might find her. Sighing heavily, she decided to just wait. The 2 spirits flying around the room started whispering about something. Hayen asked what those 2 were talking about. They were surprised. She spoke to them, so she could see them. The spirits approached Hayen and she asked if they knew where the ship was headed. But they knew nothing. One of the spirits heard the crew going to sell their captives. The 2 captives looked at Hayen. She was incredibly angry. And they wondered what the reason was. Hayen communicated with spirits by telepathy, so no one understood why she was acting this way. The girl was very angry that she was being sold like a thing. She soon calmed down. Hayen thanked the spirits for the information. The spirits were even a little scared. All she had to do was be patient. She was going to escape as soon as the ship docked at the shore. Someone entered the room and ordered everyone up. It was the bald man in the red shirt. The captives were brought food, saying it was the last. One of the spirits saw the shore and told Hayen about it. That explained their words. The captives were promised better food when they docked. Right now they just had to eat what they were given. The girl sitting next to Hayen voiced her worries aloud. She wasn't in the mood to eat because she was about to be sold into slavery. Hayen tried to calm the girl down and coaxed her to eat. Who knows, maybe she'll get lucky and get out of there. The girl's mood actually lifted a bit and she started to smile, calling Heian an optimist. Heian noticed as something strange began to happen to one of the captives. She heard the sound of falling dishes. Looking around, Heian saw all the captives in the room begin to fall to the floor. Suddenly, Heian's own mind went blank and she clutched her head. Their food was laced with sleeping pills, but she realized it too late. We are left to speculate about the fate of the captives, but for now let's consider other events. We see soldiers in armor and their commander. What's going on here? This man with a red cloak on his back and wearing shining armor ordered the soldiers to head to the mansion and arrest everyone there. Next to him stood a certain Viscount McAlpine, who was to surround the back of the mansion. The soldiers surrounded the gate. The appearance of the gate and the fence spoke of the high status of its owner. At the very least, he was very rich. The soldiers drew their swords and readied themselves. The commander drew his sword over his head and gave the order to begin. Meanwhile, Viscount McAlpine and his men were making the rounds of the mansion. He was discussing with his associate Danny the actions of Viscount Lanford. Viscount McAlpine explained why they had to be off the front lines. There were fewer of them, and Lanford had more authority. Even the property owner's soldiers couldn't get inside by standing outside. Therefore, Lanford only went in there with his men. While they were talking, a human auction was going on inside the mansion. Although they did not yet have proof that the mansion's owner, Earl Greenmore, was connected to human trafficking. Viscount McAlpine didn't believe he was involved in the slave trade. After all, that count had even helped them with one mission. McAlpine and his men were looking for the part of the building that contained the main stage on the 3rd floor. Sounds came from the window, something flew out of it. "How dare you?" a stranger in a business suit shouted. It was the very scene the Vicomte was looking for. The stranger ordered to catch the blue-haired guy running away from there. Of course it was Heian. She didn't even realize they were drugged with sleeping pills. 2 men tried to catch up with her. But Heian kept running away. She wasn't going to listen to what they were telling her. She didn't want to wait to be made a slave. Heian headed towards the window. From the window she saw the lake. Heian was about to jump. Those 2 were getting closer and closer. They don't plan on letting her escape. Heian directed a stream of air into their faces, thus distracting them. She climbed onto the windowsill. Heian jumped down from the 3rd floor. She was lucky that the lower spirits were everywhere and helped her with air magic. The spirits slowed their fall and Heian landed softly on the grass. Looking around, she realized that no one was following her. Heian swiftly rushed towards the lake. As she approached, she was surprised. Heian saw a steep and high cliff in front of her. However, the girl was determined. She grabs the fence. Climbing this little wooden fence and about to jump. But someone grabbed her sharply by the waist. Turning around, she tried to understand. How had those 2 gotten so close to her? The man dragged her away from the cliff and put her on a horse. Heian thought that one of the kidnappers had caught up with her on horseback. She had delayed for nothing. Now she would have to call Sylph. But the man gently took her hand and told her it was all right. The man continued to reassure her, telling her that he was here to help her. Heian looked at him without taking her eyes off him and opened her mouth. He was a handsome guy with dark hair and green eyes. He was fully dressed in armor with an eagle crest on his chest. The guy was about to ask what her name was, but suddenly he heard his own name from the side. This young Viscount's name was Joel. Heian continued to look at him with confusion. Danny, Joel's subordinate, came riding toward them. He wanted to know who was with his master. Joel was just about to find out. Danny, without waiting, began to interrogate the girl himself. Who was she, where was she from, what about her parents, and why was she here? It was the red-haired young warrior who acted like an interrogation. Heian couldn't tell them the whole truth. She had to lie intelligently. Joel stopped Danny, telling her not to question her. By the way, unlike their father, the two of them addressed Heian in the feminine gender. Heian let out a tear, saying that she has no mother. Her mother died during childbirth, and her father blamed everything on his daughter. She couldn't stand his accusations and so she ran away. She couldn't go home. The guys felt sorry for the girl. Danny apologized. But Heian said it was okay. Her lie worked, even though it wasn't really a lie. Joel, after listening to Heian's story, suggested that she go with them. Danny said it is a great idea and a certain Mr. Harold would love it. This gentleman was very interested in hiring a new maid. Heian was a little confused. She started waving her arms around, trying to say she didn't need it. But Joel held her close to him and said it was okay. They would only be happy if Heian accepted their offer, and besides, she needed to make some money. This was clearly not what she'd envisioned. It seemed that while the three of them were chatting, the soldiers had finished their operation. Joel gave the command to leave. Heian, meanwhile, just wanted to be let go. Joel started talking about Heian's new job again. He warned her that she had to work hard because it wasn't as easy as it looked. She needed the money and decided to take it, trusting strangers again. Heian bowed and thanked her for being kind to her. She promised to do her best. Heian accepted their offer after all, at least until she saved up some money. A little more time passed. Heian was at the location of her new job. She was learning how to be a servant. She seemed to be good at it. Her teacher asked her questions and she answered them confidently. Who the servants were, what their duties were. She answered each of the questions. Heian stood in front of her new mentor. She was surrounded by a huge hall, with large windows and long red curtains. Every inch of this room spoke of the wealth and status of its owner. Behind the mentor's back were bookshelves and a fireplace over which hung a large portrait. The mentor said that a servant should always remind himself to be useful and valuable to his master. Heian didn't think she would have to study again. The mentor asked if he understood everything. Yes, she was mistaken for a guy again. Yes, sir. A little dejectedly, Heian replied. Louder! Shouted the counselor. Yes, sir. The girl answered dutifully. He was satisfied and sent her off to fulfill her duties. Yes, sir. Heian headed to Joel's room. She knocked on the door, asking if he was ready. Joel opened the door. Did you sleep well? Heian asked. Smiling, he answered positively, asking her the same question. Together they walked down the beautiful light-colored hallway. Joel heard Heian washing dishes till night, calling the herald cruel. But Heian didn't complain, she had to keep studying and working hard. That's exactly how she responded to Joel. Upon reaching the place, Joel told her not to clean his room, but to take a break from work. Heian appreciated such a gesture, a little embarrassed and pleased. She thought Sir Joel was an angel. Heian bowed and wished Joel a good day. Sir Joel headed off somewhere, along with the lady in the red dress. Heian had been working in this manner for quite some time, but she couldn't get used to it. She thought it was better to knock those guys out and get off the ship after all. Good ideas often caught up with Heian, but she was faster. She decides to just go back to work. She wanted to give it her best, since it was the first time she was earning money on her own. Heian's workday consisted of 6 items, a lecture by Harold on servant behavior, seeing Sir Joel off in the morning and greeting him in the evening, meals and lessons in table etiquette, cleaning Joel's room, laundry and similar chores, another lecture by Mr. Harold. She was just about done with cleaning the room, though Sir Joel had given her permission not to. She saw some familiar maids, and they struck up a conversation. The girls handed Heian the master's clothes. She must take them to Joel's room. One of the maids asked how she was training with the herald, the head of the maids wondering if Heian would be sent to the kitchen today. Heian modestly replied that she had been doing well for the past couple of days. While the three of them were talking quietly, someone overheard them and was clearly unhappy about something. This young man, in a yellow vest, interfered with the girls' conversation. He didn't like Nancy, one of the maids, gossiping in the middle of the hallway. Though it was more like an excuse to get rid of them. Disgruntled, the maids interrupted their conversation with Heian and left. At this time, the guy took Heian by the shoulder, saying that they needed to talk. "She's a little confused. How can I help you?" Heian asked. The guy told her to shut up and follow him. Heian didn't understand anything. Barely had they made it outside before this guy punched Heian in the stomach, telling her of a personal grudge from the day he showed up at the house. Now he was punching her in the face. He didn't like Heian serving the master. Another punch to the stomach, also flirting with his Nancy. The hitting stopped. Heian didn't understand what he was telling her or what he was hitting her for. But the kid didn't believe her. He decides that Heian is going to hit him. Two more crept up to Heian from behind, grabbing her arms. They were going to teach her a lesson. Heian gathered her strength. She kicks one in the leg, elbows the other in the chest and breaks free of their grip. Realizing the difference in strength, Heian runs away, trying to find water. But the guy in the yellow vest manages to trip her and Heian falls. Three bullies approached her. They wanted to beat up Heian for trying to run away. That redhead in the yellow vest wasn't going to let her go, but suddenly they heard a voice. Everyone was shocked, especially those three. Fear was evident on their faces. "Would someone please explain to me what's going on here?" Joel asked angrily. Heian looked at him, in thought, not understanding why Joel had come home so early. She could not continue the fight when Mr. Joel stood in front of her. One of the hooligans tried to answer his question. They were stupid and trivial excuses. They were all just having fun and playing together. Joel asked Heian if that was the case. He seemed to understand it perfectly well already. The three of them froze in anticipation. If Heian told Sir Joel the truth, they would not escape punishment. Not only did they beat up Heian, but they also tried to deceive their master. The expression on Joel's face at this moment reminded Heian of someone. Of course it reminded her of her father. Why did she always compare everyone to him? Heian was distracted by Joel's question and he asked again. "They were bullying me, so I was going to teach them a lesson, but you interrupted me." That was the thought in her head. But she couldn't say that and decided to confirm the words of her abusers. Joel handed his horse to the three men, ordering them not to put it away in the stall, for he would soon be leaving again. They obeyed and bowed afterward. Heian rose to her feet and followed Sir Joel. They entered the house, and the servants were confused. Their master shouldn't have been back so early, and he wasn't in the mood. One of the maids asked Heian what had happened. Although it was all about her, she only replied that she didn't know. Joel walked past the servants without saying hello to anyone. This confused Heian. It was the first time she had ever seen him so angry, and she thought of telling him the truth. She was very embarrassed in front of Joel. Heian was sure that Joel was angry about what had happened to her. They both entered Joel's room. Heian watched him with interest. Joel was looking for something on his desk. She wanted to offer him her help, but she felt uncomfortable since Joel had never asked her. Heian couldn't bear that silence. She didn't know what to do. Joel is usually always smiling. He is a very kind person. The average Joel is always polite and nice to his subordinates. He dressed himself, not accepting help from Heian, no matter how much she insisted. Servants do everything for nobles, but Joel was not like that. Because of that, Heian's job was easier. If it wasn't for Joel, Heian would have escaped long ago. But Heian always tried to help him with his appearance. She scrutinized Joel from head to toe. And every time, thanks to Heian, Joel looked his best. He was grateful to her for such help. But today was different. Heian wanted him to yell at her, just to interrupt this silence. Joel found some sort of brown box and placed it on the table. He told Heian to sit down, pulling some sort of mixture out of a box. She wanted to sit on the chair across from Joel, but he told there was a seat next to him. Heian hadn't expected that. The girl walked over and sat down on the couch, a little embarrassed. Heian didn't understand why he asked to sit next to him. Joel began to apply the mixture to the cloth. The stench of the medicine was just awful. Your eyes are swollen shut, but you still want to protect those bastards? Joel asked. Warned that her face would be bruised, he began to rub the ointment into her face. Heian was a little surprised, for even her old man had never injured her. She didn't know that she could hurt herself. Even with her spiritual power, she should be careful. And what would people say tomorrow when they saw her? It seemed to her that the herald would be furious at her carelessness. Still, she was sure she'd be fine. Joel finished and asked her other injuries were. After all, she had clearly been hit in more than just the face, but Heian didn't want to show it. She said she was fine. But Joel didn't hold back and called her an idiot who didn't care after the beating. Those words pierced the impressionable Heian. Joel put a hand on her shoulder, asking where she'd been hit, but Heian brushed it away. She jumped up from the couch, saying that if it hadn't been for Joel, she would have straightened those three out. She'd only let them hit her once. Heh, sure. Joel chuckled a little at her. Heian's attitude cheered him up. Joel hardly took Heian's words seriously. She was angered by Joel's behavior. Heian vehemently asserted that she would have had no problem massacring the three brigands. Actually, Joel saved them, not her. That's what she told him. Joel, chuckling softly, said he was sorry for ruining Heian's plan. He kept insisting that Heian let him look at the other injuries. The girl tried to change the subject, asking why he was at home, since he was supposed to be at the royal castle. The attempt failed. Joel kept asking about her condition. What are you trying to hide? Did you get your ass kicked? Joel asked. Heian insisted that everything was fine. Trying to hide her injuries from him made his curiosity even stronger. Joel grabbed Heian's pants and tried to pull them down. Heian ran back. She was starting to panic. That rugged face of Joel's could not be described in words. And yes, he thought Heian was a man for some reason. Joel walked over to Heian, pushing her against the wall a little. He didn't understand what she was embarrassed about. Heian was blushing like a tomato, embarrassed. She let it go to her own head that everyone thought she was a man. But she was a girl. Joel, smiling, sighed when he saw Heian's reaction. He patted Heian on the shoulder, promising that he wouldn't hurt her. He laughed at the same time. Heian was infuriated by his laughter. She turned around and started to walk away. If there were no directions, she had no business being there. But Joel stopped her and reassured her. He just asked to show the injuries to see how bad it was. Heian listened to him and lifted her clothes a little. There was a large bruise on her left side, but she kept saying it was fine. Joel was not satisfied with that. It didn't look good at all. Joel was glad he insisted and started rubbing ointment into her side. Finished, he invited Heian to join his training. She was surprised, not knowing what he was talking about. Joel was not going to allow his servant to be beaten. Heian tried to refuse. She really wanted to show him her abilities, but she couldn't. Training would begin the next morning. Joel promised to make arrangements with the coach for her. In her thoughts, Heian screamed, why should she get... The next morning Heian came to practice. The training took place on a large parade ground, where at that time the soldiers practiced their movements. While the knight stubbornly practiced the movement with the sword, In did push-ups separately from everyone else. She didn't do very well. After several push-ups, she collapsed to the ground from fatigue and was clearly unhappy with what she had agreed to. Thoughts swirled in her head. She did not understand why she was doing all these activities when she had a lot of housework. Sir Douglas told her not to distract the others and to study on her own aside. In would be happier if they just kicked her out of this stupid practice. She, in fact, could not even become a knight. While In was doing push-ups, Joel approached her. And Danny and called her. Smiling sweetly, Danny asked how much time she had left before the end of the exercise. In didn't really appreciate this joke and demanded that he stop talking to her while she was doing the exercise. While In kept doing push-ups, Joel and Danny discussed it, laughing at the same time. They considered teaching her swordsmanship. If, of course, she wants it. Danny liked this idea. As the boys continued to tease her, she stood up and yelled at them to stop talking and go to work. In started a new exercise, promising to remember Joel his act. She went on and on doing various exercises. The coach, looking from the outside, appreciated such resilience. After exercises on the press, In went to cross-country with the rest of the knights. Soon she finishes the exercise. In stopped, wiping sweat from her forehead. The trainer, along with Joel and Danny, watched her and decided that she was ready for basic training. Sir Douglas handed her a wooden long stick, telling her that it was a gift before they move on to the next level. He congratulated In and she thanked him in turn. In thoughts, In did not want to learn swordsmanship at all. She had never even trained physically and it was just not interesting for her. While In was looking at her new gift, Danny said she was already in trouble. She realized that it was not just a stick, but a wooden sword and touched the blade. Suddenly, the coach hit her on the head with his fist. After that, he stood and looked at her with a very stern look. In didn't understand why he hit her. Danny stood up for In, saying that it was only the first day of training and it was just a mistake out of ignorance. The coach already understood this, and that is why he hit her only once. Douglas decided that Danny was very worried about In, since he was protecting her, and a strange smirk appeared on his face. He decided to give Danny a special assignment. Danny himself was at a loss. From that moment on, he had to teach the girl how to use the sword. Danny was a little shocked In hoped that he would refuse such an offer. But her hopes were in vain. Since Danny was a responsible young man and a good warrior, of course he agreed to Sir Douglas' proposal. Joel liked the idea too. He was just about to ask Danny to teach In when the prep was over. The trainer didn't have enough free time to train her on his own, so he gave Danny some advice on how to train. He advised to just start with the basics. Joel wished good luck in training and together with the coach they left. In wasn't happy about the situation, because while working with a coach, she had the opportunity to cheat. She looked at Danny. Realizing that he will not be able to hack, remaining one-on-one with him. In had no intention of becoming a knight at all, but as soon as the winter was over, she intended to travel with the money she earned. Danny asked if she didn't like having him as her teacher and gave her a friendly hug. But In simply hated to do it. However, she did not tell him about it. She said she was worried that the coach would blame Danny if she didn't succeed. Danny was a little surprised that she was worried about him. He and In were about the same age, and he suggested calling him by his first name, as if they were brothers, because he did not like being called with er. Everyone thought she was a man, and now you still have to consider Danny a brother. I would really like to explain everything to him. But all the maids already treated her like a little brother, so she decided that it wouldn't affect anything. Danny, smiling, asked to just be called by his first name. He cheered up Hae-in, saying that everything is fine, but she had a panic in her thoughts. Hae-in smiled sweetly and agreed to his proposal. Attention was diverted by noise in the side. Who called out Angela's name? They both looked in that direction. A crowd of people gathered at the entrance to the estate. Looks like someone important has arrived. A girl in a long orange dress ran towards her mother. Mom stood near the fountain and joyfully met her daughter. They hugged and told each other how much they missed each other. Hae-in has never met her, and Danny explains to her that Angela is Joel's little sister. She went to boarding school. Looks like Angela returned home for the winter holidays. Hae-in watched all this with interest and thought about how wonderful it is to see her mother after a long separation. This moment made her think of her mother. She told Danny that she would go and change and come back. Hae-in changed into her work clothes and approached Mr. Harold. She assumed that due to Angela's arrival everyone was busy and offered her help, but the Herald refused. He told her to just help Joel. Hae-in offered her help to get to know Joel's sister better. The Herald asked her to report if she noticed anything strange. It's been a couple of days. As the new year approached, Hae-in had more work to do. Oh-na walked down the corridor, sorting through the mail. Suddenly, she came across a letter from Angela's school. She managed to read that it was a report card, when suddenly, her mother Angela appeared behind her and asked what was in her hand. Hae-in handed the letter to Mrs., explaining that it was from Miss Angela's school. Mom looked over the report card and saw that most of the grades were just awful. She crumpled this report card. Full of rage, she began to call her daughter. The heroine was frightened. I did not know what to do. Angela's mother ran to look for her. Immediately, excitedly ran up to Hae-in Harold. He had to find out what happened. Hae-in explained that Madam had just read a letter from Angela from school and was very angry. Harold understood what was happening. They had to find Madam. Together they set off in search. Suddenly, Hae-in heard the voice of Angela. As she got closer, Hae-in peeked out the door and saw Angela arguing with her mother. The mother promised that Angela would be able to go to her friend, but after seeing her grades, she changed her mind. Angela was very unhappy with this. She was supposed to leave for a friend the next morning and in every possible way tried to put pressure on Pity for her mother. Harold interrupted their conversation and knocked on the door. He wondered what happened. Mother Angela sighed heavily, but was glad to have Harold present. Madam ordered to find a tutor Angela. Someone was supposed to teach her mathematics and history, and the sooner the better. Angela stated that something was wrong with the history score. She tried to explain that she had a bit of an argument with the teacher, but Madam was adamant, leaving her under house arrest for a whole month. She also forbade her to go shopping, and let her not even dream of going to her friend tomorrow. Angela began to sob and beg her mother to let her go, promising that she would study when she returned. The mother still did not change her mind. She had to stay at home until the tutor came. Hae-in, standing outside the door, smiled maliciously. After all, the nobles also had to get good grades. So what? She is not the only one to suffer. She didn't know what to do. Should she have left Angela alone in this state? Harold urged Hae-in on to quickly calm Angela down. This proved unsuccessful. She returned back to the Herald. He explained to Hae-in that Miss Angela flunked the subject. Hae-in thought that Madam was just worried about grades. She did not know that in this world, too, they bring down students. At the end of each semester, students take tests on the past material. There are minimum requirements for each subject. If you can't do it, you'll fail. Madam never got angry for bad grades, but she didn't tolerate failure. She thought that no matter how hard you study, the main thing is not to be negligent about learning. That's why the herald respected her so much. Angela well and was sure she wouldn't waste her time doing something she didn't like. She won't even look at the item she doesn't like. Hey, In suggested one option. Why not hire someone she likes? After all, the appearance of a teacher can sometimes motivate. Harold approved this idea and went to ask Madam. Perhaps Angela had her own reasons for such behavior, but hey, in hope that she would find a good tutor and pass the test. A week has passed. Hey, In is walking down the hall and spots Angela. Hey, In was wondering if she would like the new teacher as Angela worked hard enough. She hoped Angela wouldn't fail the test this time. Suddenly Hey, In called the maid. Hey, In was watching Angela and the maid noticed it. She doesn't seem to think about it. Together they began to discuss Angela. They felt sorry for her. The girl was all alone in this mansion. Her brother was busy all the time, and it was impossible to play with the maids. Besides, Madam forbade inviting friends. Angela was so upset that she didn't even leave the room, but she seemed to feel better. The maid remembered that she had to go back to the kitchen. As she left, she told Hey, In not to worry. After all, she will not tell anyone that she likes Miss Angela. Mentally, Hey, In was furious that it wasn't like that. The next morning, our heroine went to another workout. They were already pretty fed up, she just wanted to lie in her bed. Hey, In liked to spend her free time the way she wanted to. She went to start another exercise, when suddenly she noticed someone. It was Miss Angela. But what was she doing there? Maybe she liked one of the knights. Hey, In took a closer look and realized that Angela looked a little sad. Maybe she was just jealous that others were having fun, but she wasn't. Angela looked like she needed a friend. Hey, In tried to figure out how to help her. She began to remember how she herself had fun at school and went through the options. Hey, In wanted to teach Angela one of the games and try to build a relationship with her. After all, if she was going to stay in this world, then meeting and interacting with other people would be clearly more useful than her old man, who calls himself the King of Spirits. She went to Angela, asking what she was doing there. Angela replied that she was just walking. Hey, In decided to somehow suck up to her. She wants to tell Angela a secret, asking if Angela can keep it. Her mood immediately lifted. Of course, Angela promised to keep it a secret. Her eyes lit up with interest. What was the secret? It was something that the heroine couldn't even tell Joel. Angela puffed up her ears, pleased and prepared to listen. And Hey, In told her that, in fact, she was not from here. Angela was a little disappointed by such a secret. But that was not all. Hey, In tells her that she is an elf by birth. Angela almost screamed in surprise, but Hey, In asked her to be quiet. Angela took a closer look at Hey, In and realized that her unusual hair and eyes indicated this. She had never met elves before, but she knew that Hey, In was not a pure-blooded elf. She had heard that there were quite a lot of half-breeds in the neighboring country, but they were rarely seen. Hey, In explained that she didn't live with people until recently. She was in such a deep place that no one could ever get into. Angela assumed that Hey, In lived in the Pensa Mountains with the elves, but the explanation only made things more complicated. It was such a remote place that she hadn't seen a single elf in all that time. But one day she heard about beings called humans who created societies and lived together. Then Hey, In realized that the world she lives in is too small for her. And she left her home. Angela was just full of joy from hearing the story. Hey, In dreamed of seeing the world. For Angela it was just an amazing story. But Hey, In didn't know anything about the human world. And I didn't know that people kidnap and sell others into slavery. But Angela interrupted her and said that the slave trade was against the law. Listen do this, and her country is the best. Hey, In decided to play along with her. Now she knows where she was caught and almost sold into slavery. Hey, In was brought to auction in a country called Bellini, but luckily, Sir Joel and his knights rescued her. Angela heard that her brother recently caught the slavers, but she didn't know that Hey, In was there too. How nice it was to lie to an innocent girl. Everything was exactly like that. Sir Joel was kind enough to take her away. She felt really good here, but she still didn't know much about this country. And then it dawned on Angela. Did Hey, In talk to her about this to ask for a favor? A very smart girl. After training Hey, In came to Angela. Angela asked about her workouts. Hey, In replied that she couldn't get used to exercising every day. Looks like Angela was playing with herself. Hey, In was glad that she liked one of the games she taught her. Hey, In promised to teach her another game when they were done. Angela happily agreed. Angela couldn't wait to go back to school. She wanted to teach her classmates how to play the games Hey, In showed her. Before class began, Angela asked Hey, In to wait as they had a special guest today. Is this a new student? Surprised Hey, In. A special teacher, replied Angela. Mom allowed her to bring friends when she found out that Angela was studying hard. Until a friend came, Angela offered to play. After a while there was a knock on the door. A girl with purple eyes, long blonde hair, books and scrolls in her hands entered the room. Her name was Martia. She and Angela hugged, obviously missing each other. Hey, In helped her take off her coat and met Martia along the way. Martia knew that Hey, In was helping Angela with her history studies. She gave Hey, In a children's history book and said it would be very useful to her. Hey, In accepted this book, thanking her. It was a collection of Mother's fairy tales on history, a book for kids. But who cares, because Hey, In really liked this book. Angela asked what Martia I had brought with me. It was a map of the world. Martia unfolded it on the table and they all began to look at it together. Quietly, Hey, In asked Angela if she could accept the book as a gift if they had just met. Angela said that she can safely accept the gift, because she promised that Hey, In will teach her fun games. This must have been Marcia's way of expressing her gratitude. On the map Angela showed Hey, In mountains Pensa. Apparently, she wanted to show her where Hey, In came from. Together they stared at the map in amazement. Looking where the Kerguelen Sea is, and where Hey, In, she realized that she had climbed very far. The continent they were on was called Graham. Martia called out to the heroine, asking if she knows why the continent is called that. But how was she to know? Martia was surprised that Angela didn't tell her this fascinating story. Why not tell? Angela thought. She was sure that Hey, In would like this story. The continent was named after the man. It was the first and only man in history to unite the continent. Hey, In wondered what he looked like. Previously, there were dozens of countries on this earth. Due to wars, some of them disappeared or merged, while others formed. For Hey, In it was very familiar. Apparently people everywhere lived the same way. Martia continued her story. One day, the young king of a small country conquered an entire continent. He united it and was known as a great king and a great swordsman. He is the great Emperor Graham. Martia imagined him riding a white horse through all the battlefields, majestically and courageously. The light breeze barely touched his golden hair, the color of a fiery sunset. Hey, In pretended to be great, when in fact she was bored. It was the same story she studied at home in her past world, only it had different participants. Stories about other races would be much more interesting. But Angela interrupted her from her thoughts, saying that this was not all. She wanted to talk about a certain makepeace. He must have been a big shot. Hey, in thought as the girls adored these heroes in a cute way. Pointing to the city on the map, called Makepeace, the heroine decided that the people of this city helped the emperor. Angela explained that Makepeace is the name of a great magician. And the capital of the state was named after him. He must have done a lot for the capital once it was named after him, In mused. Makepeace was the emperor's right hand and one of the greatest magicians in history. Historical books said he was extraordinarily handsome. With long, waist-length, sacred silver hair and a white robe. He looked like a beautiful angel. Just imagine. Angela spoke. Incredibly beautiful mage. And a brave knight with copper hair. About which, after many centuries, the bards sang songs. And our heroine admired this story. So it was a love story between an emperor and a magician? In asked. For girls, it seemed very romantic. In was wondering what happened. But little was known about this. People said they had encountered forbidden love. And then Angela said that they were both men. But did it matter when it comes to love? In was not a little surprised. She thought Makepeace was a woman. Their love was unacceptable to society, so they could not express feelings openly, said Angela. They hid their feelings from everyone, Martia continued. While the girls were acting out this scene, In was a little embarrassed. She realized that girls her age were interested in the same things as her, although they were from different worlds. In suggested that the story ended after they started living together happily ever after. But this was not so. After the unification of the continent, they quarreled. Moving away from each other, they began to live separately. But despite the fact that they parted, their love was also strong. They never understood or forgave each other until the end of their days. Martia interrupted this story and suggested that we return to the history lesson. According to history, the emperor believed that the best race to rule was the human race. There were others identified as demi-humans or monsters. Elves, gnomes, mermaids and beast-men. There were also dragons, but they were an exception. Nobody could resist them. In suggested that this could be the cause of the conflict and she guessed right. Makepeace did not agree with the emperor. The reason was that God created not only people and the opportunity to rule the country should be equally given to all races. He believed that people should not encroach on someone else's land and someone else's power. Because of these words, some began to think that Makepeace could be an elf or a dragon that took the form of a man. Was it possible? Thought In. Angela continued the story. She said that on top of that, he was close to becoming a rank 9 mage. Which is a rarity for his age. In thought, her mother was a rank 7. How cool was the 9th one? The girl said that the highest rank possible for a person is the 7th. Those who reached it received the title of a great magician. Only dragons could reach the 9th rank. Now she understood why people began to think that he was a dragon. He was the first great magician to reach the 9th rank. In recalled that the Spirit King was also strong. She wondered who would win if her father and the dragon fought. She imagined this picture in her head. Angela turned to In. She asked if there was something that could help fulfill her cherished desire. What would she wish for? In could wish for anything. She was wondering if there is such a thing. But the girls asked not to change the subject and just answer them. Angela insistently asked for an answer, whatever she wished. In thought for a moment. And she began to say what she would like. She wanted to return home honorably. Angela imagined her in a beautiful suit, surrounded by people meeting her and asking if she would come home one day. In replied that she would return home when the time was right and asked, by the way, what this thing looks like. Angela said it was a gem called God's blessing, but no one knew what it looked like. Martia heard that at the time when he was with the emperor, he shone like gold. God's blessing is famous for the fact that it changes color and shape depending on the owner. In wondered what he would look like if she had one. She liked the shape of the blue ruby. On this cheerful note, Angela and her friend ended their story. Now it's In's turn to train them. Since Martia was filming for the first time, she cooked up something new. It was a game called Cat's Cradle. The next morning again began with training. In really wanted to leave, she didn't want to become a swordsman at all. Also, the weather was too good for a stupid workout. But Danny insisted that she focus, her sword shaking. He asked if she was okay. In replied that she was just a little tired. Danny assumed that she missed Miss Angela. Apparently In fell in love with her. Yes, absolutely everyone perceived her as a man. In got angry and started brandishing her wooden sword, demanding that Danny not tease her. As he ran away, he told In not to worry because Angela would be coming home for the summer holidays. But she didn't care at all. After training, she went to start her usual duties. In was squeezed like a lemon and couldn't believe that Danny had been making fun of non-stop days all this time. Suddenly, a man in black clothes appeared in front of her and called out to her. He must have been a guest since the guards let him in, but he looked suspicious. This strange man said that he had never seen In before and asked him his name. She gave her name. The stranger suggested that she was a commoner since she did not have a last name and asked how old she was. She politely replied that she turned 18 this year, but in her mind she was very angry. Who was he to even ask her so many questions? The man began to examine her, asking if she was a summoner. In began to explain that summoners are those who are bound by a contract with spirits. But she never entered into contracts and did not even know how to do it. But the stranger just passed by, not even paying attention to her words. In chased after him, but by then he had entered the mansion. The herald met him and greeted him, calling him Mr. Stewart. This Mr. was pleased meeting. In thought he was a very big shot since Mr. Herald met him. Pointing to In, the stranger asked who the boy was. The butler wondered in confusion what In had done wrong. The man replied that everything was fine. He just wanted this kid to work for him. Everyone was surprised. The herald explained that the servant had already been presented to Sir Joel and he was unable to dispute this. Meanwhile, In didn't understand what was going on at all. He couldn't have known who she really was. Seeing Joel, the man decided to ask him about it himself. Meanwhile, Joel went out to greet this man. Mr. Stewart praised him for a job well done last year, as stories of his exploits even reached his city. They shook hands and the man congratulated him. He decided to ask Joel for one favor. Stewart asked me to give him this kid. Joel offered to help him find a suitable servant if needed. The man was a little surprised that the master had his own servant. He must have really liked this guy. He thanked the master for the offer, but explained that he was only interested in this boy. In has been in turmoil all this time. Why don't they ask her opinion? Stewart asked me to understand him correctly, he wanted to teach In magic himself. Joel asked with interest if he would like to take him on as an apprentice. This was a bit of a surprise for In. She realized that Stewart was a magician, not a bum. The herald remarked with surprise that the Mr. had never taken an apprentice before. Impressed, Stewart explained that he sensed a large amount of mana in him. To him, In was an uncut nugget and if properly trained, he would be more useful than a servant. Thoughtfully Joel lowered his gaze and said the following. In that case, he should have been the one asking Stewart for a favor. In was confused, she could hardly cope with the sword, and now also learn magic. It was already too much for her. The herald demanded that introduce herself in a proper way, because from that moment on, Mr. Stewart was her teacher. Hey, herself just stood and trembled as she looked at him. She said that she was very pleased to meet him and bowed, although in her thoughts she almost sobbed. A little later, Hey, started her usual duties. She was carrying tea somewhere on a cart, still complaining about her morning workouts. Danny demanded too much from her and did not give her concessions. He even made the training more difficult, simply because she was trained in magic. But Hey, didn't even want to learn magic. She walked into her new teacher's office and said good morning. Stewart asked if she had read everything. Apparently, he gave her some books on magic. She answered yes. Hey, has heard enough from this old man about the importance of mana. He praised her a little and told her to read more while he was gone. Hey, really didn't want to, she thought she would die of old age while she was reading. Hey, has already perfected the whole theory. She wondered if she could choose the book herself. The teacher seemed to understand what kind of book she needed. He was just about to give her a book called Mastering the Art of Summoning. This book had everything, including the basics and how to make a contract with the spirit, and therefore, it was supposed to be useful for the student. Hey, was very happy to see this book, her eyes sparkled with joy. She began to flip through the pages, promising that she would definitely read it in the absence of a teacher. But Stewart wanted to tell her one more thing. He warned her not to be a fool and not make a contract with a spirit. Some summoners have died in an attempt to make a spirit summon. She promised not to. The teacher left, saying that he would not return until the evening and that she could leave when she was done. Hey, held it. And I started reading the book. Saying that nothing will happen to her. She wondered who she would call first. During the next class of magic, Hey, went outside with the teacher. She was excited about her first magic lesson, but didn't understand why they had to do everything outside. The teacher explained that if someone with as much mana as hers didn't learn to control it or made a mistake, it would be a disaster. They will be grateful if only the mansion burns down. Hey, couldn't believe it. All she has tried to do so far has been water figures. The master decided to show her the first lesson. Fiery flames began to appear around his palm. And a fireball formed over his palm. Hey, was surprised he didn't even use a spell. Stewart explained that the basis of magic is not casting spells, but mana control. Hey, was confident that she could do it and tried to follow his instructions. When she tried, she only got a water clot. It was easy for her to use her spiritual energy, but she did not understand the essence of mana and did not understand why she could not summon fire. The teacher told her to relax and focus on collecting her mana. She decided to think about the energy of that lower fire spirit named Casa, with the help of which she cooked her own food and she began to succeed. But the power of her call was so great that the fire began to grow rapidly to a huge scale. The master tried to stop her. But there was an explosion. Hey, stood at a loss. They were both burned, and the master, covering his face with his hand, decided that there was one more thing that was worth teaching her. It had been a long time since she started learning fire magic. Taking some book with her, she made her way to the training ground at night. The fire magic was too strong for her. Hey, didn't even know how many explosions there were all the time. That's all because she wasn't used to using mana, but she was sure everything would go smoothly with the summoning. In her hands was the same book about summoning spirits that Stewart had given her. Opening the book, Hey, read that, as a rule, one must use a magic circle in order to summon a lower spirit to make a contract. But she heard that the magic circle was not needed if she had good spirit compatibility and closed the book. Hey, considered it humiliating to rely on a magic circle to summon spirits when she could see and speak to them anyway, and threw the book away. Hey, focused and began to summon the mistress of the wind. She commanded her to answer her call. And suddenly, a spirit appeared in front of her in green clothes with green hair and long, like an elf's ears. Although the spirits had no gender, but judging by the body, the spirit looked like a girl. The spirit asked who called her. But In stood surprised, realizing that it was not in vain that she did not try to do this in the room. In asked who she was, the spirit was not like Sylph. This upset the spirit. How could she confuse her with Sylph after such a passionate call? She was the highest spirit of all winds, her name was Celestine. In was pleased with herself as she had just summoned a higher spirit. While In was praising herself, the spirit rushed around her, offering to sign a contract already. For some reason the spirit was more excited than In. And In agreed. The spirit kissed her on the forehead, and from that moment their contract was concluded. This was her very first contract with a top-ranked spirit. It was amazing for her, In couldn't be happier. It was difficult for her to train as a swordsman and magician, she never even wanted to, but it was amazing. And she proceeded to call the next spirit. In called upon the ruler of the earth to answer her call. Another spirit appeared from the ground in front of her. He also asked if she had called him. The spirit was a dark-haired brunette with yellow eyes and ears like an elf. The spirit of the wind looked at him in surprise, pronouncing his name, Noinen. In looked at him with the same astonished look. She had never seen an earth spirit before. The spirit asked if she wanted to make a contract with him. But In was a little shy about another kiss on the forehead. The spirit approached her. It was a kiss not on the forehead, but on the lips. She was full of amazement and blushed all over. The contract was concluded, it was already the second contract. The wind spirit was very worried about whether she would contract more. While Celestine was wondering who would be next, In was embarrassed and realized that this was her first kiss. Being frustrated, In began to rock on the ground, thinking that this was not how she imagined her first kiss. Although the spirit was tall and beautiful, it was a spirit. So it didn't count, In thought. At this time, the spirit stood and looked at her, not understanding what was happening. The spirit of the earth approached her and asked if everything was all right. In calmed down, rose to her feet and offered to summon the next spirit. But suddenly, she ran somewhere. She peeked around the corner and waited for the guard to walk past them before moving on. The spirits asked with interest where she went. In ran to the stable. She ran to some boxes and stole a torch. She needed fire, but In couldn't use her magic, because otherwise, there would be an explosion. Holding a lit torch in her hands, she began to summon the ruler of fire. Suddenly, the fire of the torch began to get bigger and bigger. In got scared, throwing it out of her hands. Before her, she saw the spirit of fire. He appeared before her in the form of a fiery bird. The spirit also asked if she had called him. In replied that she would like to sign a contract with him. In cheek. The contract was signed. The spirit of the wind admired her, In called upon all the higher spirits. The spirit of the earth spoke about the fact that it is difficult for a person to conclude a contract with the spirits of more than 4 different elements, even if they are of low ranks. It was amazing. In explained that she is not like everyone else. There is no one like her anymore, In is special. The spirits were confused. She had to call only the spirit of water, In was wondering what he would look like. She went to the horse trough filled with water and decided that this amount of water would be enough. In began to summon the ruler of water. She began to peer into the water. Seeing there a reflection of herself and the spirits around her, it seemed that she was the very ruler of the water. But nothing happened. In thought that summoning the water spirit would go smoothly. The earth spirit asked who she was trying to summon. He explained that if once In had already entered into a contract, she could summon the spirit without a spell. But she didn't have a contract with the water spirit. In thought that a high-ranking spirit would appear. She couldn't believe no one had even shown up. The spirits she summoned said they could feel the Spirit King's aura around her. They were all perplexed. If In already had a contract, did that mean she could order her father around? Thinking about this, In started laughing evilly. The rest of the spirits thought she was crazy. She looked at the spirits and said that she was done with the contracts and they could already be returning. But they didn't want to go back, because the spirit world was very boring, and they asked In to let them stay at least for a little while. All she had to do was let them know if In needed help and they would show up immediately. As they chatted, something strange began to happen to the water. Unexpectedly for everyone, her father appeared. He said that In looked like she was having a lot of fun. Hearing his voice, In trembled. The spirits were surprised to see him. In couldn't believe her ears. Elaine asked her what was the reason for his calling In a fugitive. Milo, calling his daughter an idiot, he said that he turned a blind eye to her antics. Those words pierced her. But Elaine continued to lecture her. The father accused the daughter of carelessness. In was so preoccupied with herself that she was almost sold into slavery, not to mention that In became the servant of some imbecile. He asked her if she liked this life away from him. The daughter was furious. Since he knew everything, why didn't he come and help her? And how did he even know all this? But while In was in this world, she was always under his supervision. Elaine could be anywhere, wherever there is water. For a moment he was silent and grinned. In looked at him silently. And there is no place in the world without water. Approaching, her father told her. In was scared. She looked at the spirits she called and asked not to stand, but to help her. But they just turned away. Her father was waiting for her explanation when In returned. But instead, she herself summoned him. What were the reasons? And In confusedly tried to answer him. She decided to ask right here and now, no matter what happened. And she invited her father to conclude a contract. The spirits watched them intently as an awkward silence fell between father and daughter. In thought that her father would agree to the contract. At this time, Dad began to conjure something. It came as a surprise to her. In thought he agreed. Of course, she would not have been very happy with a kiss, but she was ready to endure this moment so that after that she could order him. But instead of a contract, a large jet of water flew into her. Let's get started, her father told her. But In managed to dodge. She yelled at Elaine saying that he scared her. Elaine was impressed. Apparently stick training was not a waste of time. After that, he continued to attack. Once again, In managed to dodge. They haven't seen each other for so long and the first thing he wanted to do was kill his only daughter. But her father watched her every day. She had not seen him for a long time. And once again he corrected her that she was a son, not a daughter. On what In demanded to stop calling her his son. But Elaine was adamant. She was a son to him because he said so while continuing his attacks. Of course, In knew that sometimes she was mistaken for a guy, but still she was a girl. The father continued to attack, she dodging. And attacked again, and again In dodged. He went on and on without stopping, she still dodged. Seeing such a reaction, the spirits clapped. But In she asked me to stop doing this and help her. Distracted, she did not notice her father's next attack and was unable to dodge. In flew off several meters, fell to the ground and rolled over several times. Of course, Elaine understood that she just wanted to get revenge on him with a contract. But the Spirit King could not be controlled. The spirits only answered her requests. Hey, and I didn't understand why it was necessary to beat her then. Elaine explained that she herself started this when she ran away from home, and also decided to take revenge on him. She asked to be kinder to her and try to understand her, because he is still much older than In. At that moment, Elaine noticed someone. Were they making too much noise? Approaching from the back, someone grabbed in hand. It was one of the guards, followed by Mr. Stewart and other warriors. How dare she? He warned her about the magic circle, but what did she do? She was lucky that she was not injured, although she could have been badly hurt. After all, he warned her that there were people who died during the call, but In went for it anyway. The teacher pointed to the mess she had made there and asked where her book was. But she couldn't answer. In looked at the 4 spirits. Didn't he see them? Spirits of higher ranks can control their presence, it was they who decided whether people see them or not. This is how Elaine explained it. The teacher didn't like that In ignored him. He grabbed her by the collar and began to drag her somewhere. Stewart was full of anger and warned her that if she ever dared to use advanced magic without his supervision one more time, she would never get away with it. He continued to drag her from the scene, and at this time the spirits followed her on the heels. She didn't understand why her father was following her now, because before he always left her alone. They followed her all the way to the room. Sat on the bed and listened to the spirits talking about something. Noticing how watching, her father said that she looked dumb and it was time for her to sleep. But was too curious to go to sleep. Why was she so interested? She had contracts with all the higher spirits. Fire, earth, air, and only water remained. I really wanted to see the higher spirit of water. Elaine did not understand why she needed the spirit, because he was here. She said unhappily that her father made Darren watch her all day. Why couldn't a high-ranking spirit do the same? Elaine breathed, snapping his fingers began to invoke the spirit. Before the supreme spirit of water appeared in the form of a dragon. The spirit's name was Elestra, and Elaine was about to send it back. The daughter stopped him and asked him to wait. Stated that she wanted to sign a contract with him. The rest of the spirits stood in perplexity. The Supreme Water Spirit replied that she had the Spirit King's energy flowing through her and she didn't need a contract with him. She was surprised that the Spirit King was really so great. Father noticed that it would be possible to say this more often. Was about to go to bed, saying that why not just accept the compliment. And when will he leave? She was cool to spend time with the rest of the higher spirits, because they did not know the human world, unlike her father. Elaine went to the bed, poked her head into the pillow and told her to just go to bed. It seemed that for the King of Spirits, he was too stiff. He needed to be looser. The father didn't like that saying very much, he was going to slap her with his jet of water. Noticing this, immediately covered herself with a blanket and wished everyone a good night. The next morning, as usual, began with a workout. Practiced her sword move while Danny watched her. Danny reprimanded her about exercise. She noticed that he hadn't looked well lately. The workouts were getting too intense lately, and he should have thought about her pace. Danny took out his practice sword and began to show in movements, swinging it in all directions. She needed a strong base, just so she would soon be able to control her sword. Previously, they often joked and had fun during training. Missed this a little. Danny heard that she recently started studying magic. But didn't want to talk about it and pretended to train hard. Danny approached her and told her to focus on one goal. He took her by the hands with which she held the sword. He ordered to start over. Didn't understand why she had butterflies in her stomach after his touch. After training, she began to perform her usual duties. In still couldn't finish cleaning. Behind her stood her father. Did she really enjoy serving people all day long? He asked. But she did what she had to do. In should have just told her father if she wanted to go home. He could take her back in the blink of an eye. The rest of the spirits, hearing about this, began to wonder what Miss In's house looked like. She didn't understand why all of a sudden the spirits started calling her Mississippi. The spirits had no reason to respect people, but this is a completely different case, because is the daughter of the King of Spirits. She liked this attitude, and she began to get used to it. The spirits reminded In to go to a magic class. She knew about it and asked her not to rush. In came to her teacher's office and knocked on the door. She arrived very on time. Looks like the teacher had something to say to her. She had been making progress lately and he was delighted. Stuart will start teaching her more advanced things. The wind spirit Celestine was happy about this, but in herself seemed to have a different opinion. Elaine felt that she should have been ashamed, as she studied under a mage whose rank was much lower than that of her mother. The teacher wanted In to increase the time for practicing magic. Since she had other things to do in this house, she should have retired from morning training and practice magic more. In was amazed, because it was Sir Joel's order. But she didn't really like training, so In wasn't exactly upset. Stuart took off and ran to ask his permission. In was clearly surprised by the teacher's reaction. Stuart came to Sir Joel's office and explained the situation to him. In practiced diligently to control mana and showed good results. For this reason, he wanted to increase the duration of magic practice at this crucial moment. That would be better for her. In covered her face with her hands, not understanding what she was getting into and why the teacher was so quick in her actions. According to her father, she looked very pathetic. Elaine thought he should have just dragged her back home. But In still didn't want to come back. She knew that this was forced on her, but she still wanted to develop her skills in sword fighting and magic, imagining herself as a very cliched magic knight. In smiled, thinking that where there is a stick, there is also a carrot. Danny looked at her at that moment. He looked at her thoughtfully. In realized that he noticed her smile and hoped he didn't misunderstand her. She wasn't smiling just because she would have to continue her magic practice. Danny turned to Sir Joel. He said that In also wanted this and asked that Mr. Stuart's request be considered. Joel considered. He asked for forgiveness, saying that he would like his servants to have good physical fitness. Smiling, Joel looked at In. And I wanted to hear her opinion. She was a little worried. Danny hoped that In would not choose sorcery and continue training. And Stuart hoped she wanted to study magic. Apparently In didn't expect anyone to ask her opinion. She didn't understand why this was happening to her. Elaine said only to do what she wants. He didn't understand what the problem was. Sighing heavily, In didn't know what had gone wrong. She turned around. Looking at this confrontation Danny and Stuart. She had a bad feeling, but what other options were there? The father insisted that In do as she sees fit. He decided to speed her up a little by saying that since she enjoyed the company of people to her will, maybe it's time to go home? It worked. Both classes were close to her. Previously, she managed to combine them, and she wanted to leave everything as it is. It seems the teacher has now understood her position between Sir Joel and Danny. He agreed, although he considered it a disgrace. To In, it sounded like Joel and Danny somehow influenced her decision about the future. She looked at them. In seemed like they looked unhappy. Elaine suggested that she take care of that guy, alluding to Danny. But In refused. The next morning, during training, Danny asked if she wanted to continue. Of course she did, because In has never said that she doesn't like swords. But she also never said otherwise. Now that Danny started thinking about it, he realized that In never asked to train. These were all orders from Sir Joel. The wind spirit peeked out from behind her, asking if that was the case. Celestine knew that she hated training and just wanted to sleep. And it wasn't too late to leave. But In didn't want to leave, as there was so much to learn here. It seemed to the spirit that In was just someone who was not indifferent. After all, there is something that people call the code of honor. Are you following him too? Celestine asked. Hearing this, the rest of the spirits, including her father, stared at In. But she wasn't about to tell anyone because she was too embarrassed to say that. In seemed like being a summoner was just as cool as being a swordsman. Once again, In got distracted and again drooped in her fantasies. Danny called her. He was dissatisfied with the fact that she again hovered in the clouds. But In only made excuses. If he really wanted to concentrate on magic, as Stuart said, then Danny could let In skip his morning practice. But she tried to calm him down. She wanted to study magic, but In never thought about becoming a magician. She said she was studying magic purely out of curiosity. The spirits began to whisper something behind her back. Wind Spirit decided to bet that In only studies magic because she thinks it's cool to use magic and summoning. She was embarrassed at these words. In fact, she heard everything. Danny was not happy that In was talking about magic with such zeal. You didn't have to look at him like that every time he said it. In made excuses again. All this picture reminded her father of a circus. In just meant that she didn't want to focus only on magic. She wanted to learn how to skillfully wield a sword, too. Danny pointed out that she also wasn't going to put all her effort into developing her skills to become a swordsman or a knight. He grabbed her by the neck in a friendly way and hugged her, saying that he knew that In was a lazy slacker and with such an approach she would definitely not achieve anything. Danny promised to make a new person out of her and she better not be distracted. From today they will start special training. In didn't like it anymore. Joel crept up behind and wished her good luck, as there was a lot of work ahead of her. In wondered where he came from. And Danny dragged her in an unknown direction. From a distance, she only screamed that she was quite pleased with what was happening now. In asked Joel to stop Danny. A few hours later, In was standing in the middle of the corridor, barely able to stand. But she still has a lesson in magic ahead of her. By the way, no one stopped Danny. Her father gloated as usual, asking if she was homesick. But In told him to back off, stomping his feet on the floor in annoyance. Such childish behavior. She did not look like her mother at all, and her father did not understand who she was. But if not in the mother, then who can it be? They made eye contact and the spirits began to watch them. What will happen now? But In simply asked her father to be quiet if he was going to stay. After all, she was very tired. She just knocked on the door. How the teacher immediately opened it, saying that it was just in time. It seemed to her that Stuart was leaving somewhere, and she can finally pretend that she was reading and take a little nap. In was about to go read something. Master said that advanced magic can only be used in real battles. From now on, she had to be ready for his lessons on the training field. Then he could not increase the time of the lesson, so he will be as strict as possible now. The joy on In's face disappeared somewhere. Together they went to the training field. And the teacher was going to show her something. In had to be able to create at least 2 or more elements at the same time. At that moment, a fireball formed in one of his hands, and a wind whirlwind in the other. Stuart put them together in place. It turned out to be an incredibly powerful spell. A large pillar of fire rushed past her, hitting the target. Despite the power of the spell, there was no explosion, as well as serious destruction. They couldn't afford the explosion like last time, so they had to start small. Hey, In tried to concentrate and cast a spell of low power. Suddenly a thought came into her mind. She could have put more power into the spell. The main thing is that it does not explode. Hey, In began to transmit some kind of signal. This signal passed through the head and other spirits. She ordered the Celestin to bring the wind to her hands. The spirit complied with her request. Selena gave her fire. And in her hands, a fiery wind whirlwind began to form. After showing her spell to the teacher, she asked his opinion. He was right, she had a talent for magic. Why shouldn't she quit the rest of her classes? But hey, In didn't listen to him because she admired herself. The very modesty. Hey, In would have done it much sooner if she had known. Magic has become much easier than before. She looked forward to further cooperation with the spirits. They promised to help next time. It seemed that just yesterday she did nothing but blow everything up, but now she is already capable of creating complex spells. They had to keep going. Hey, In was in complete agreement with Stuart. She had 3 higher spirits behind her. What could go wrong? It looks like something has gone wrong. Hey, In was forced to do math. She didn't understand why magic needed mathematics at all. Even when In was in school, it was hard for her to figure out where to use it. She hoped that she would never have to worry about this nonsense again. The wind spirit told her that compound spells were more than just combining elements. To create and compile the perfect combination, you need to know their optimal ratio, and this comes from mathematics. Her teacher told her about it. In it seemed that living in another dimension would be much cooler than all this. She wanted to be a high school student again and go to high school. Maybe you should tell him that she is a great summoner. But if In does that, her life will never be the same again. What if you tell Stuart that she has already signed a contract with the spirits? But this could lead to big problems in the future. People could see how unique In is. She didn't understand why she had to be special. It sucks to be cool. Her father noticed that her brain had gone about its business again. Apparently she just had to study. In really wanted something interesting to happen. She wanted to be free from this tedious cramming, if only for a few days. Several days have passed. Joel was sitting in his office looking at a sheet of paper. She and Danny discussed the news about the hunting trip. The event is called the Westmoreland Marquis. They were going to go there. In stood aside and listened to their conversation. She didn't quite understand what that meant. Joel confidently decided to attend this event, because he had not seen everyone for a long time. Whatever it was, In wanted to be taken along as well. Joel hasn't seen his friends for a long time. It's been about half a year already. In did not understand what they were talking about, but decided to remind herself. Joel took notice of her. He invited In to go with them. She was happy. And Danny, on the contrary, was alarmed. Danny got up from the couch, slamming his hands on the table. In was not ready yet and didn't know how to handle weapons at all, it was too dangerous and he didn't want to allow it. What kind of hunting must it be to be so dangerous? Joel was sure everything would be fine if they introduced Mr. Stuart to her. It seemed to mean that she was on her way. Danny thought about this option. Well, as long as In is next to the teacher and doesn't follow them everywhere, everything should be fine. It was not a bad opportunity for her to see how the sword is used in real-life situations. In was beaming with joy. Joel was glad that Danny supported his decision. In addition, In will be able to see how the sword and magic are used in life. Danny agreed. Perhaps this trip will be useful to her. But In did not understand why they took mages with them to hunt, because her teacher is too strong for this. And then she realized that she would have to remain in the rear all the time. In didn't ask you to worry about her like that. Care made them softer. Whatever it was, it sounded fun to the spirits. In warned them to be quiet until she spoke, promising to leave them here if they disobey. Joel advised them to prepare well, as they would be traveling in a carriage for several days. This should have been a good experience for In. She was full of joy, because she was going on a trip. In the evening In packed her things, singing about how there will be no training and magic lessons. Her father again affectionately called her an idiot, insulting her singing. As always, in your repertoire. But it was her first vacation, so it couldn't ruin In's mood. Actually, it's just a short break, but vacation sounds better. Putting things together, she drew attention to the book that lay on the bed. Taking a closer look at it, In didn't quite understand why Joel told her to read it. She didn't want to be lethargic tomorrow, so she put the book down and decided to go to bed. In will read it when he returns. She began to fall asleep. But this book is an encyclopedia of monsters. In was surprised to admire the beautiful scenery from the window of the carriage. It was just what she needed. Of course, it would be better to plan something yourself, but that's also cool. She turned around. And I saw that all the spirits were sitting in the carriage. Is her father following her again, and the rest, too? He was here to look after her. Who knows what kind of trouble she'll get into? And the spirits were there just to help her. They thought that this trip would be very interesting. Isn't it better to spend this time with them than alone? In asked the wind spirit to get off Danny because she looked ridiculous. However, they could be useful, besides, no one saw them. In agreed, but asked her not to do anything until she said so. And she ordered them to sit on the floor, otherwise it looked strange. Not that it mattered. It was a special journey with spirits that only she had seen. In considered it the best trip ever. The teacher noticed that she looked excited. Chuckled, and replied that she couldn't do anything about it. Was it in anticipation of the hunt or because of the journey? Interested in Stuart. More likely because of the journey, because it was the first time she left the mansion. In really liked hunting, as it's just killing animals. She didn't understand why people liked it so much. All three of them looked at her in surprise. Animals? What is she all about? In wondered if they weren't going to hunt animals. Joel realized that she never read his book. In thought it was before her training and was going to read it when they got back. Danny decided to explain everything to her now. The teacher tried to explain, if it was just a trip to hunt ordinary animals, then did she really think that only the best knights and the great mage of the manor would go? She guessed that this was too much even for aristocrats. This explained everything. But then who will they hunt? Danny explained what to the monsters. So that's why he gave her this book. Why didn't he tell her it was for travel? In asked the spirits what kind of monsters they were, describing zombie ghosts and various others to them. But they were completely different monsters. But what? She thought. The teacher and her old man looked at her at the same time. Don't tell me he doesn't know what monsters look like. The teacher spoke. Do you even know what monsters are? Asked by Elaine. But In really didn't know. Danny thought she was joking. After all, she must have heard different stories about trolls, orcs and others. In justified her ignorance by the fact that she lived in a very, very remote place and did not know much yet. Danny guessed that if she lived in the woods, she would definitely see at least one or two as she grew up. Turning to the old man, In agreed with Danny's opinion. Too bad there were no monsters in the ocean. Apparently they all ran away when they found out that a mean old fart lives next to them. Of course they weren't, because Elaine put up a barrier to protect her. The prank failed. But he could tell her about them, couldn't he? Elaine did not have time, because she fled before he could do it. Stuart decided that her parents didn't tell her anything. Joel was sure In had their reasons. They might give her some information for their own safety, Joel decided. In started arguing with her father again. He could tell her at least something in advance, blaming him. Elaine called her strange since In didn't know anything about monsters. But they weren't where she came from. In realized that two people can play this game and started asking her father if he knows what movies, game consoles and television are. Elaine was furious. Again they are on their own. The spirits commented, watching from the sidelines. The teacher started to say In. He asked her how animals react when they see a person. In replied that they were running away. That's right, but the monsters were different from them. If you see a creature that does not run away from people, but rather attacks them, then most likely this is a monster. The smarter ones can talk to people or use magic. Others act instinctively, and some are physically similar to humans. There are many different monsters in the world. In asked about the demi-humans. Stuart thought for a moment. He explained that they only mistake them for monsters if they attack to kill or eat people. She seems to understand everything now. Danny explained that this is a dangerous hunt and In may even die. Did she really think it would be a picnic? Danny joked. She was wondering if it's so dangerous, then why is Sir Joel coming off? This trip was a tradition for Sir Joel and his friends, even before they left school. Every year, at this time, one of them arranges a trip. Monsters become especially dangerous during the period of early summer until late autumn. Although it is considered just a game for the nobles, hunting is also beneficial for people. Danny seems to have realized that this is the reason they created hunting trips. Perhaps it was. Joel was wondering whose team would win this time. Danny asked if he could hit him as his friend. But Joel refused as his lord. Will he win? This clearly interested In. She thought there would be a prize for the winner. Again In began to dream. She was sure that she would definitely win with her skills. Full of confidence, In decided to show everyone what she can do. Who knows, maybe she can help Sir Joel a little too. After all, she has a couple of her skills in her arsenal and In knew how to wield a sword and use magic. In was asking if the team with the most kills would win. But everything was not so simple. There are strong and weak monsters, so there is a scoring system based on the Book of Monsters. For a weak monster, they give 1 point, for a strong one, 2 points. Thus, they give points to each monster, and at the end of the game they count their total number. So, did the team with the most points win? In asked. Joel praised her, saying that she was a fast learner. As usual, In was a little overconfident. It was evening and she fell asleep. Danny woke her up, they had already arrived. In looked out of the carriage window and was pleasantly surprised. She saw thick and beaten walls in front of her. This place was very different from the capital. The invasion and attack of monsters is already commonplace here, which is why the walls are so thick. Pa CC showed Joel. Mark from Westmoreland resides in the east of Belleny. Although this is a mountainous area, but it is calm and there is a lot of food. A big plus is the warm climate, which attracts a large number of animals. This explained why the monsters preferred this territory. Surprised, In asked the spirits if they knew about it. But the spirit of the earth explained that they were not particularly familiar with what was happening in this world. And she asked this question to her father. She was sure that he had seen them quite a few times if he put up a barrier. And she was absolutely right. Now In really wanted to see the monster. Of course, they may seem creepy, but she would like to fight at least one. Elaine distracted her from her fantasies. He said that with her skills, staying alive would be top luck. In should have listened to what was being said to her. She actually practiced it hard. In was sure she could. Stuart warned her not to be a fool and not to do anything rash. In was here to watch and learn, and of course to experience what it's like to live in the real world. Joel advised her to listen to the teacher. After all, she was still a rookie. But they just didn't know about her power yet, but unfortunately, In couldn't just take it and show them everything right now. The father asked since when did the powers of the spirits become her powers. She signed a contract with them. Their powers are her powers. Did she think she deserved it? The old man was a little angry. He insisted that it was all thanks to him because he was her son. But that was a lie, because she was his daughter. They were already about to fight. In said that she didn't need his powers and that he didn't stand in her way. Let's get ready to be surprised. The carriage stopped. In opened the door and Sir Joel stepped out. As soon as he was leaving, someone called him. A guy ran up to him and lightly hit him. On the other side, another person approached him and put a hand on his shoulder. These were his friends. It was difficult for them to contact him. Why did they have to throw a hunting party every time just to see his face? How shameful he is. But Joel just asked him to let go. In watched the three in surprise. She approached Danny and said she didn't know that side of Sir Joel. These two were his closest friends. Tall, with blonde hair, this is Sir Beaulieu. He is the Lord of Westmoreland and the master of this city. Danny advised her to remember it. In was surprised. Danny really knew everything. Danny continued his story. This is nothing, but when he thinks about Sir Joel's friends before he comes of age, then everything is much more interesting there. But he decided to tell this story later. Danny told In to take a break after taking Joel's stuff, since he'll probably be hanging out with his friends late. Soon In finished. Now she had to unpack her bags. Standing on the stairs, she drew attention to some bustle below. What could have happened at such a late hour? The servants, together with the master of the manor, greeted a certain venerable Miss Ginevra. They were not ready for her visit, because they did not know her arrival. She called this estate the same dull place as many years ago. So why was she here? The owner asked. Ginevra replied that she was clearly not here to see him. She came to see Stefan. He was sarcastically surprised by such amazing nobility. Ginevra came to such a sad place to see her beloved Stefan. He should have told Stefan about her sincerity and devotion. Ginevra asked me to take her to her room. It was quite a long way and she did not have the strength to exchange pleasantries. But Beaulieu, without much desire, kept up a conversation with an uninvited guest. He ordered the servants to take her to a room. The servants warned that although the room is not in the best shape right now, they hoped that Ginevra would be satisfied. She promised that everything would be all right. After all, she is already so familiar with how inferior this place really is. In took her for a very important person and was glad that she didn't have to deal with her. Suddenly, this lady turned to her. She ran her fan over her shoulder. Asking if he is deaf.